Chapter 311. Blake, I'm not done with you. Tris stood in her reception area, lost in thought. Unlike her usual absent-mindedness, this time her mind was preoccupied with regret over her recent timidity. If only I had been braver, she mused. Suddenly, her train of thought was interrupted by a voice calling from nearby. Tris, the dean has requested your presence in the biological injury department on the second floor, the voice said. The dean? Tris's eyes sparkled with a flicker of hope, and she immediately dashed toward the biological injury department on the second floor. Upon reaching the second floor, Tris found herself in the bustling biological injury section, a place frequented by many patients. The wizarding world, with its inherent monotony, often drove its inhabitants to seek entertainment in various forms. A common pastime was the keeping of magical pets, which, while alleviating boredom, also led to a fair share of injuries. St. Mungo's Hospital, therefore, saw a steady stream of wizards and witches harmed by their exotic pets, many of which were highly dangerous. Blake, following Dean Bohun, entered a ward named Di Llewellyn. Blake knew that Di Llewellyn had been a renowned Quidditch player whose life had tragically ended in the jaws of a chimera. The ward named in his honor served as a somber reminder of the dangers posed by magical creatures. Blake, with a touch of irony, realized he carried a master ball in his pocket that contained a chimera. The Di Llewellyn ward was dimly lit and rather small. Inside, two individuals were already present. Dean Bohun introduced them to Blake. The elder, Hippocrates Smethic, was the chief therapist of the ward, and the younger, Augustus Pye, was a promising trainee therapist soon to be promoted. Among the visitors was Albus Dumbledore, whose presence immediately drew the attention of everyone in the room, overshadowing Blake and Professor Kettleburn. However, Augustus Pye took particular notice of Blake. "Are you Blake Green, the one who invented the life-extending potion?" he inquired, having recognized Blake from the newspapers. Blake confirmed his identity, seeing no reason to conceal it, especially since Grindelwald had already exposed him in the Daily Prophet. Augustus, impressed by Blake's achievements and having heard much about him from his sister, Therese Pye, eagerly shook Blake's hand. After visiting the patients, an unprecedented event occurred. Several patients, whom even the dean could not aid, were discharged from the hospital, a testament to Blake's remarkable healing abilities. Augustus, familiar with his sister's stories about Blake, was eager to meet the young wizard whose deeds seemed almost miraculous. Sibocrat, an esteemed healer, also expressed his eagerness to meet Blake after overhearing Augustus's comments. Despite the dim lighting and Dumbledore's dominating presence, Sibocrat's interest was piqued upon realizing who Blake was. He approached Blake with enthusiasm, shaking his hand vigorously. Dean Bohun watched the interaction with a smile, recognizing the significance of a new, miraculous healing technique in their midst. For seasoned healers like them, the corridors of Smore, Mungo's Hospital for Magical Maladies and Injuries, were steeped in history. Among them, Professor Kettleburn stood out, not for his healing prowess on this day, but as an eager spectator, ready to witness the unveiling of a groundbreaking therapy. Dean Bohun, with a tone of certainty, addressed the room. "Okay, Sibocrat, Blake is here today to introduce a new therapy." "I've heard what the patient said," Sibocrat exclaimed, his eyes alight with anticipation. "I am thrilled. A magical spell capable of healing cursed wounds and regenerating severed limbs. Under normal circumstances, such a claim would be dismissed as mere boasting. But coming from Blake, and given that Dean Bohun himself has endorsed Blake's presence here, it lends the claim undeniable credibility." "Sibocrat, do you remember him?" Dean Bohun gestured towards Professor Kettleburn, who had been contentedly observing the proceedings. "Of course, I remember. Merlin, his injuries were horrific back then. He was nearly reduced to a shadow of his former self." "What?" Sibocrat did a double take, scrutinizing Professor Kettleburn once more as the latter obligingly rolled up his sleeves, revealing arms that were once again whole and healthy. Is this the result of that spell?" Sibocrat gasped in astonishment at Professor Kettleburn's restored limbs. "Is the effect permanent or temporary?" he inquired. "Permanent, of course. My arms and legs have fully regrown," Professor Kettleburn declared proudly. "Permanent? That's incredible." Sibocrat's skepticism vanished, replaced by sheer belief in the spell's efficacy. Blake watched the exchange with a satisfied grin, content to let the results speak for themselves. He envisioned a future where his magical spells and products would be widely recognized, bringing him not just fame, but a comfortable life. At that moment, a frail voice interrupted their conversation. Does that mean my injury can be cured? A gaunt figure lay on a nearby hospital bed, his appearance marred by a missing portion of his nose, seemingly bitten off by some creature. Blake noted the clever choice of patient by Dean Bohan. Compared to regenerating an arm, reconstructing a nose seemed a simpler task. Yes, Mr. Bosey, we've discovered a new treatment that can restore your nose, Blake assured the patient. Does that mean I won't have to live with half a nose anymore? Mr. Bosey asked, his voice tinged with hope. Absolutely. Dean Bohan responded, his confidence unshaken despite not having performed the spell himself. His faith was rooted in Blake's proven track record and his own healing abilities. The more he learned about the regenerative spell, the more he believed in its miraculous potential. Excuse me. A cautious knock interrupted their discussion. Triss, standing at the door, felt it impolite to enter unannounced. Augustus frowned. Triss, what are you doing here? Her usual post was at the reception desk, and her absence could draw unwanted attention from the dean. It's fine, Augustus. I asked Miss Pye to join us, Dean Bohan interjected, dismissing any concern. It's important for our young healers to observe and learn firsthand. Relieved by the dean's approval, Augustus held back any further comment. He had only wished to protect his sister from potential reprimand, not to scold her himself. Triss stuck her tongue out at Augustus playfully, then smiled gratefully at Blake. She knew her presence there wasn't just the dean's decision. Blake must have requested her attendance. Her gratitude towards Blake was evident. Okay, now that we're all gathered, let's begin, Dean Bohan announced, ready to proceed. His excitement was palpable, yet he maintained the compassionate demeanor of a healer, ensuring all preparations were in place before commencing the treatment. Dr. Bosch spoke again with a tone of caution. I must emphasize once more, Mr. Boss, that this treatment method is still experimental. While it's harmless if unsuccessful, there could be unforeseen complications. Are you certain you wish to proceed with this treatment? Mr. Boss replied with determination. If the alternative is living with half a nose for the rest of my life, I'd rather take my chances and meet Merlin himself. With Mr. Boss's consent, Dean Bohan felt reassured. He took a moment to study a photograph of Mr. Bosch before his injury, then closed his eyes in deep thought. Suddenly, he opened his eyes, his decision made. With a swift motion, he pointed his wand at Mr. Rohr, Bosch's disfigured nose, and exclaimed, Abitaning Tasti! A bright blue light flashed, momentarily illuminating the dimly lit ward. Blake, witnessing the blue light, knew instantly that Dean Bohan's spell had been successful. The absence of blue light would have indicated failure. As expected, the wound on Mr. Bosch's nose began to transform under the glow of the faint blue light. Granulation tissue started to form rapidly at the site of the injury, followed by swift regeneration. In mere moments, Mr. Bosch's face, previously marred by injury, was fully restored. Blake applauded and exclaimed with a smile, Congratulations, Dean Bohan, on your success, and to you as well, Mr. Boss. Dean Bohan, looking at his handiwork with satisfaction, felt a surge of joy. Sibocrat, meanwhile, gazed at Blake with an intense curiosity and eagerness to learn, barely managing to articulate his desire to be taught. Triss, with a thoughtful gesture, handed a mirror to Mr. Bosch, who was still lying in the hospital bed. Initially bewildered by the new treatment, Mr. Bosch only felt a numb and itchy sensation where his wound had been. It wasn't until he saw his reflection in the mirror, handed to him by the attentive Triss, that he realized his nose had been miraculously healed. Overwhelmed with emotion, he touched his restored nose and exclaimed through tears of joy, Incredible! I swear, I'll never go near a fire dragon again. Augustus then quietly explained to Blake he had secretly hatched a fire dragon, which ended up biting off his nose. Despite facing a hefty fine to avoid imprisonment in Azkaban, Mr. Bosch felt no sorrow now that his nose was healed. The mood in the small ward was a mix of emotions, but one thing was common. Everyone, except Mr. Bosch, knew that Blake had invented the new treatment. Each person present showed their gratitude by contributing at least one treasure chest to Blake. Blake let out a relieved sigh, simply stating, Cool. Sibocrat, can you teach me this spell? Sibocrat finally asked. Dean Bohan smiled and responded, Blake has already taught me this spell and has agreed to help promote it. Is that true? Sibocrat looked at Blake in astonishment. Blake, your generosity is truly inspiring. Blake smiled and said, a spell that benefits everyone should be shared. Keeping it to oneself doesn't serve its true purpose. He added, besides, not everyone can master this spell, as proven by experience. Hearing Blake's words, everyone in the ward looked at him with admiration. In an era where selfishness was common, such selflessness was indeed rare. Following this, Blake received a wave of treasure chests as tokens of gratitude. Blake, I'd like to offer you the position of honorary counselor at St. Mungo's, Dean Bohan proposed excitedly. That might not be possible. I haven't even graduated yet. Blake hesitated, not keen on the idea of working. He preferred a life of leisure and showing off his talents. No, you wouldn't need to work regularly. Just take on the role, and your salary will match mine, Dean Bohan insisted, and will prominently display your contribution in the hospital's main hall. Blake felt a mix of honor and reluctance at the proposal. In the midst of the chaos, Blake couldn't help but glance at Dumbledore for guidance. With a reassuring smile, Dumbledore said, just accept it. You've earned it. Think of how many people will benefit from your magic. Okay then. With Dumbledore's approval, Blake found no reason to decline. Triss gazed at Blake in admiration. You are amazing. It's nothing. Blake fidgeted with his wand, a twinge of guilt washing over him. Without the aid of the wish-fulfilling wand, the creation of such a curse would have been a monumental task. Under normal circumstances, it would have required 3 months of relentless effort and sleepless nights to even conceptualize it. Dumbledore then turned his attention to Dean Bohan, his tone suggesting a deeper thought. Actually, I believe Blake's previous award of the Order of Merlin, 2nd class, was somewhat understated. Catching Dumbledore's meaningful look, Dean Bohan quickly grasped his implication. Leave it to me, Albus? Father, are you traveling to England? Gabrielle asked, her eyes wide with curiosity. Yes, my dear, but you must stay here. Listen to your mother while I'm away, all right? Mr. Delacour tenderly stroked Gabrielle's hair. His trip to England was crucial, as he needed to negotiate with the Woolley family. Gabrielle's brow furrowed slightly at her father's words. Dad, may I accompany you? Seeing the longing in his daughter's eyes, Mr. Delacour's heart softened. His precious daughter, usually so content at home, was now eager to venture far. Don't worry, darling. I'll return before you know it. No, what I meant was, Blake is in the UK. If I go there, I could visit him. Gabrielle's words struck Mr. Delacour like a cold blast of wind. Where had his considerate little girl gone? It seemed she had been replaced by a young woman with her own desires and interests. And at the center of those interests was Blake. Mr. Delacour's thoughts darkened at the mention of his name. Blake, this isn't over between us. Chapter 312. It turns out that I am not worthy. In the wizarding world, true nobility is not just a title, it's a lifestyle, often synonymous with wealth. The Woolley family epitomizes this, living in opulence akin to nobility. Similarly, Mr. Delacour, who finds himself waiting outside the grand manor of the Woolley family, belongs to this affluent class. Mr. Delacour's unexpected visit took Mr. Woolley by surprise. As Mr. Delacour settled into the living room, Mr. Woolley, puzzled, inquired, I thought we agreed in our correspondence that I would bring the raw materials to you in France. What brings you here in person? I had initially planned to purchase a few bottles of life-extending potion during my visit and then discuss our business, Mr. Delacour explained. And now? Mr. Woolley pressed. Now, Mr. Delacour began, his fists tightening momentarily before he relaxed and took a sip of his coffee. I've come without acquiring the life-extending potion. I'm here to ask you one thing. What might that be? What did Blake give you? Mr. Woolley was taken aback, unsure why Mr. Delacour would suddenly pose such a question. Reluctant to answer, as it fell outside their business arrangement, he hesitated. Mr. Delacour, realizing his eagerness might have been too forward, calmly continued, Blake provided us with the formula for the life-extending potion. The revelation left Mr. Woolley astounded. The formula for a life-extending potion was akin to a treasure trove, far more valuable than any magical plant seeds he possessed. The fact that Blake had shared such a secret with the Delacour family was beyond his wildest expectations. "I've shared my piece. Now, would you tell me what Blake gave you?" Mr. Delacour asked, his gaze unwavering. Mr. Worley, still processing the information, responded, "Why are you so convinced Blake has given us something? Because you have a daughter as well, don't you?" Mr. Delacour's implication was clear, causing Mr. Worley's expression to change. He understood the insinuation, but didn't share the same extreme sentiment. Indeed, Blake did provide the Worley family with something, seeds of rare and magical plants. While valuable, they hardly compare to the life-extending potions formula. Mr. Delacour pondered. Could it be that what I received is more valuable because I have 2 daughters and you have only 1? The question struck Mr. Worley deeply, causing him to drop his cup, which shattered on the floor. "We can overlook their normal interactions," Mr. Worley finally said, "but if that boy intends to play games with our daughter's affections, I will not stand for it." Meanwhile, Blake, oblivious to the brewing storm, sneezed unexpectedly. "With my enhanced physique, why am I sneezing? Must be too much cumin," he mused, adding more chili powder to the skewers in his hands, enhancing their aroma. "Aha, Blake, your culinary skills are impressive," Hagrid complimented, emerging from his hut with a plate of freshly grilled meat skewers. "Where are the vegetables, Hagrid? It can't be all meat," Blake protested, casting a bubble charm to keep the skewers warm. Hagrid replied sheepishly, "It's winter, Blake. Vegetables are hard to come by. Would potatoes suffice?" Blake rolled his eyes. "I came here to barbecue because I was tired of eating the same old food. Even muggles manage to eat vegetables in winter. Surely, we wizards can do better with magic-enhanced vegetables than greenhouse ones." He then produced a sack from his pocket, filled with a variety of fresh vegetables, and handed it to Hagrid, who was pleasantly surprised by the bounty. In this snowy weather, enjoying a barbecue at the doorstep was indeed a delightful experience, made even better by the magic of friendship and the warmth of shared meals. "Aha! Just be prepared," he declared, before heading back into the house to fetch more vegetables. Meanwhile, Blake carefully placed the raw meat skewers on the grill, his mind wandering back to an incident that occurred a few days ago at St. Mungo's. After demonstrating a groundbreaking spell to regenerate severed limbs to the healers, Dumbledore had inquired if Blake had any means to heal the Longbottoms. Blake had responded with uncertainty, claiming he hadn't found a solution yet. However, the truth was that he had a potential remedy in mind involving the use of a wishful wand, which could possibly cure the Longbottoms. Yet, Blake chose not to pursue this option for several reasons. Firstly, employing the wishful wand for such a purpose would likely invoke a new curse, possibly related to the soul, marking a significant advancement from the limb regeneration spell. Despite Blake's reputation for brilliance, casting 2 such powerful spells in one day would raise suspicions, even from Dumbledore, making it a difficult situation to explain. Secondly, Blake had already maximized the benefits from the treasures obtained through his limb regeneration spell. Revealing a soul-repairing spell at that moment would mean no further gains from those treasures, as their value would have been fully exploited. Thus, after careful consideration, Blake decided to delay the healing of the Longbottoms, allowing time for everyone to digest the implications of the limb regeneration spell. As Blake was lost in thought, Hannah approached him from the direction of the castle. Her eyes sparkled at the sight of the meat skewers in Blake's hand. "Why does your barbecue smell so amazing? Can you teach me?" she asked eagerly. "Of course," Blake replied, handing her half of the skewers. "But why are you here alone? Where's Hermione?" Hannah shrugged as she turned the skewers over the grill. "She said she had a potions paper to finish and couldn't make it." Blake sneezed suddenly, realizing he had accidentally touched his nose with chili-covered fingers. Rubbing his nose, he expressed his concern about Hermione's recent behavior. "Every time I invite her, she's busy. But didn't she finish her potions paper on Friday night?" Hannah, brushing oil on the grill, hinted at a possible reason for Hermione's absence. "Maybe she doesn't want to see you?" Blake was taken aback. "You might be right, Hannah. But why would that be?" Hannah shook her head, sharing that she had overheard Hermione talking to herself about feeling useless. As Blake pondered Hermione's words, he realized his oversight. He had sought assistance from the Delacour family, and even Cassandra, which might have made Hermione feel sidelined, especially since she had a competitive relationship with Cassandra in academics and duels. Now, when Blake needed help, Hermione might feel overshadowed by Cassandra's involvement. Watching Hannah enjoy the skewers, Blake resolved to address the situation with Hermione, understanding that his actions, however unintentional, might have contributed to her feeling of inadequacy. The Weasley family and Fleur Delacour's family both extended their support to Blake, leaving Hermione feeling particularly helpless. As a Muggle dentist, she found herself unable to offer any magical assistance to Blake, a realization that deeply frustrated her competitive nature. Hermione, with her keen intellect, often found herself lost in thought, pondering over complex issues. This time, however, she felt utterly defeated, questioning the appropriateness of her friendship with Blake due to her inability to assist him. Blake, observing Hannah enjoying her skewers with a carefree smile, couldn't help but wish Hermione could adopt a similar indifference. With practiced ease, he seasoned the skewers before handing them all to Hannah. Standing up, he gazed towards the castle, activating his unique ability to see through its walls, his attention fixed on the library. There, by the window, sat Hermione, a thick potions book open before her, though her focus seemed elsewhere. Despite the appearance of studying, Blake noticed her stagnant page, indicating her mind was preoccupied. Remembering the chili powder on his hands just in time, Blake refrained from touching his face. Hannah, cheeks bulging with food, looked like a content hamster. After swallowing, she remarked on Blake's apparent confusion, her observation contradicting any notion of her being heartless. In fact, her attentiveness was undeniable. Expressing his gratitude, Blake acknowledged Hannah's hint about Hermione's distress, something he might have overlooked amidst his busy schedule. Hannah, with a hint of hesitation, admitted her own confusion about whether to share her concerns with Blake, but ultimately decided he deserved to know. Blake was taken aback by Hannah's candidness, her strategy of openness and sincerity, endearing her to him even more. It was a lesson in transparency and honesty, qualities that Blake realized could help lift Hermione from her gloom. Just then, Hagrid appeared, bearing a plate of freshly prepared vegetable skewers, a skill he had learned from Blake. Hannah eagerly took on the task of grilling the vegetables, assuring Blake she was adept at it and encouraging him to attend to his matters. Meanwhile, in the library, Hermione's focus wasn't on her book. She was grappling with the realization that Cassandra posed a significant challenge, not just academically, but in other aspects as well. Hermione had always considered her rivalry with Cassandra to be evenly matched until she learned of Blake's intention to collaborate with Cassandra's family, a move that made her question her own capabilities and her place in Blake's life. Hermione suddenly realized that the dynamics between herself and Cassandra were far from an even match. She had overlooked a crucial element, the influence of their respective family backgrounds. If Blake were to consider a future partner, someone who could bolster his career, Cassandra or Fleur would naturally be at the forefront of his options. And then there was Hermione, a Muggle-born witch, the daughter of dentists. What leverage did she possess in comparison? The realization hit her hard. She felt unworthy, a mix of frustration and reluctance swirling within her. "Oh, forget it," Hermione murmured to herself, trying to dismiss the disheartening thoughts. "Forget it." A familiar voice echoed in her ears, pulling her from her reverie. Lifting her gaze, Hermione was greeted by Blake's comforting presence, his face adorned with a warm, inviting smile. "No, it's nothing," she managed to say, attempting to mask her turmoil. Blake glanced at the paper in front of her. "You've finished your essay, then? You must have some free time now," he observed cheerfully. "Come on, I want to show you something." In a moment filled with a magical spark, Hermione and Blake vanished from the library, leaving no trace behind. Meanwhile, Baker, the house elf, materialized in the now quiet space. With a gentle snap of his fingers, all of Hermione's belongings that were left behind soared into a box as if guided by an unseen hand. Baker then took the box and with another snap disappeared just as swiftly as he had appeared. This seamless coordination, the care taken to ensure Hermione's belongings were not forgotten, spoke volumes of the unseen support system at Hogwarts. Yet, for Hermione, the journey ahead seemed fraught with personal challenges and doubts about where she stood, not just in Blake's life, but within the broader wizarding world. Chapter 3:13. Grindelwald. Die young. I have Alzheimer's disease. Blake. Didn't I tell you I'm not hungry? I really don't. Hermione's protest was cut short as Blake pulled her through a dimensional door, leaving the library behind. She had assumed Blake was dragging her off to another one of his barbecue sessions. Despite finding his skewers irresistibly tasty, Hermione was far from being in the mood for them at the moment. However, before she could finish her objection, she realized they were no longer at Hogwarts. Instead, she found herself standing atop clouds. Ah! Hermione exclaimed, her voice laced with astonishment. As she looked around, the realization dawned on her that they were not actually in the sky, but on the summit of a towering mountain. Blake, holding a plate of sunflowers radiating a warm glow, handed it to her. These sunflowers seemed to possess a magical warmth, turning the chilly mountaintop into a place as cozy as spring within moments. What do you think of this place? Isn't it beautiful? Blake asked, his gaze lost in the sea of clouds below the mountain. The peak they were on was small, its surface rough and uneven. Hermione, trying to find her footing, replied, I can't say much about its beauty at the moment. My legs feel like jelly and it's a bit hard to breathe. Blake quickly apologized. Sorry, I was negligent. A bubblehead charm was cast on Hermione, easing her discomfort somewhat, though she still felt a bit dizzy. I'm sorry. I just wanted to show you the most breathtaking view here. I overlooked how uncomfortable you might feel. I disregarded your feelings, Blake admitted, his tone reflecting a hint of guilt. Hermione sensed an underlying message in Blake's words. Could it be that he had figured something out? Why else would he disregard his own feelings? She stole a glance at Blake, who seemed lost in thought as he gazed at the clouds below. Quietly, Hermione placed the sunflower on a stone and took out her wand, attempting to flatten another stone into a bench. However, her usually reliable transfiguration skills faltered, and the stone morphed into a barely recognizable stone bench. Dissatisfied with the outcome, Hermione frowned at her creation. Suddenly, the stone bench transformed once more, this time into a beautiful armchair covered in luxurious velvet. Turning her head, Hermione caught Blake putting away his wand. Sometimes I'm really envious of your talent, she admitted, her voice tinged with frustration. Despite her efforts, the stubborn rock had barely changed, while Blake had effortlessly transformed it into something entirely different. Blake seemed taken aback by Hermione's comment. I just wanted you to be more comfortable, he stammered, clearly flustered. You know, in this weather, a stone bench isn't very inviting. Hermione's mood lifted at Blake's concern. It was comforting to know he cared. So, did you transform it into a chair just for me to sit on? She asked, a playful smile on her lips. This, of course, it's for you, Blake replied, his initial reluctance fading under Hermione's intense gaze. I can't just transform chairs one by one. But I saw you put away your wand, Hermione teased. Blake, touching his chin awkwardly, explained, I just wanted to try casting spells without a wand. His proficiency in wandless magic was evident as another identical armchair materialized beside the first. Blake smoothed the ground beneath them, ensuring the chairs were level, before sitting down next to Hermione. Together, they gazed at the serene sea of clouds floating beneath the mountain peaks, the solitary peaks resembling isolated islands in a vast ocean. On an isolated island surrounded by the sea, tranquility reigned supreme. The gentle sunlight mingled with the glow of sunflowers, casting a warm embrace over Hermione. As she took in the breathtaking scenery, she finally understood the allure of this place for Blake. It was a quiet paradise, perfectly suited to Blake's reserved nature. With a flick of his wand, Blake transformed a newly created platform into a stone coffee table. A circle of sparks appeared beside him as he gestured with his left hand, and soon a pot of hot tea and 2 teacups materialized on the table. They sat in silence atop the mountain, their gaze fixed on the sea of clouds, sipping tea. No words were exchanged, yet the silence was comfortable, even meaningful. Hermione found solace in the shared quietude, watching the clouds and the sunset, feeling her spirits lift and her self-confidence return. The melancholy and self-doubt that had plagued her heart dissipated in this magical place. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with shades of vermilion, Blake broke the silence. "Do you like it here?" he asked. "I do," Hermione replied, her voice soft but certain. "It's magical." Blake offered to teach her his dimensional gate spell, so she could visit this place whenever she wished. But Hermione declined, fearing that learning the spell would mean losing these shared moments with Blake. Her refusal puzzled Blake, who was unaccustomed to anyone rejecting his offer to learn such a coveted piece of magic. Meanwhile, at Nurmengard, Grindelwald found himself in a moment of confusion, questioning whether he had made tea at noon or not, humorously pondering the possibility of wizards suffering from Alzheimer's. At St. Mungo's Hospital for Magical Maladies and Injuries, Alastor Moody, leaning on his cane, and Tonks, munching on a bag of multi-flavor beans, were discussing a new treatment that promised to heal injuries and disabilities through a magical spell. Moody, ever suspicious, found it hard to believe that such a cure was possible, especially one purportedly invented by a child. His skepticism was rooted in years of enduring pain and suffering, making the prospect of a simple magical cure seem like a far-fetched fantasy. This narrative weaves together moments of quiet understanding, magical wonder, and skepticism, highlighting the characters' diverse reactions to the extraordinary elements of their world. Alastor Moody, known for his vigilance and suspicion, honed through countless life-and-death battles, was not one to easily let his guard down. Even with the prospect of receiving medical treatment from Dean Bohun, he refused to proceed without confirmation of Professor Dumbledore's identity. His caution was understandable, given his experiences. Thus he awaited Dumbledore's arrival with a determination that could only be described as stubborn. Dumbledore, upon receiving the urgent message while in Professor McGonagall's office, used flu powder to swiftly transport himself to St. Mungo's Hospital. Upon his entrance, he was greeted not with a handshake, but with a disarming spell from Moody. This unexpected greeting was a testament to Moody's wariness, but Dumbledore, with his exceptional reflexes, avoided the spell effortlessly. It reappeared in front of Moody, rendering the attack futile. The spell instead struck the wall, leaving behind a shallow crater. "Alastor, you really are," Dumbledore began, his tone a mixture of exasperation and amusement. "Ha! The real Dumbledore!" Moody exclaimed, finally lowering his wand and shaking Dumbledore's hand with enthusiasm. "Only the true Dumbledore could dodge my surprise attack with such composure." Dumbledore sighed, deciding not to argue further. He understood that convincing Moody of his identity was crucial for the treatment to proceed. Any further discussion might only deepen Moody's suspicions. Soon, the room was prepared for Moody's treatment. Dean Bohun, having successfully treated many patients before, was ready to tackle Moody's complex injuries. With Dumbledore's presence providing reassurance, Moody, though reluctantly, allowed himself to be secured to the hospital bed. His prosthetic limbs and magical eye were removed, the latter placed on a bedside table. "If Dumbledore hadn't been here," Moody muttered weakly, acknowledging that only his trust in Dumbledore made him compliant. Dean Bohun, rolling up his sleeves, announced the start of the treatment. "We'll need 3 sessions, Alastor," he explained, addressing Moody's severe injuries with a plan that balanced effectiveness with his own endurance. 3? So I have to endure being tied up like this 3 more times?" Moody asked, a hint of dread in his voice. Dean Bohun nodded, emphasizing the necessity due to the extent of Moody's injuries. He reassured Moody that the first session would focus on restoring his eyes and nose, parts of him that had suffered significantly. Moody, despite his initial reluctance, expressed eagerness at the prospect of regaining his natural sight, seeing it as an opportunity to relinquish his reliance on the magical eye. "It might hurt a bit," Dean Bohun warned, his expression conveying genuine concern. "The pain varies from person to person, so I want you to be prepared." Moody, however, faced the warning with a brave smile. "Bring it on," he said, ready to endure whatever was necessary for the chance to heal. His resilience and trust in the moment, underlined by Dumbledore's supportive presence, marked the beginning of a challenging yet hopeful journey towards recovery. "Come on, old Bohun. I can't believe there's anything in this world more excruciating than the Cruciatus curse," Moody challenged, his voice laced with skepticism. "I've withstood the Cruciatus curse before," This should be nothing. Moody's words were abruptly cut off by a flash of blue light, and he began to scream in agony. What happened? Did the spell fail? Dumbledore, taken aback by Moody's distress, couldn't help but ask in surprise. It shouldn't have. Blake assured us that even if the spell failed, it wouldn't harm anyone, Moody managed to say through gritted teeth, his face contorting in pain, making him look almost unrecognizable. My eyes, they hurt so much, he screamed, his voice filled with unbearable pain. If he hadn't been confined to a hospital bed, he would have likely been rolling on the floor, clutching his eyes. It's working. The spell is actually working, Dean Bohan exclaimed, observing Moody, who was now drenched in sweat. He noticed that in Moody's right eye socket, where there had been nothing but emptiness, flesh and blood were beginning to regenerate. Hold on, Alastor. You'll be all right soon, Bohan encouraged, though Moody could only respond with a guttural scream, the pain overwhelming him. After what seemed like an eternity, Moody lay on the bed, exhausted and drenched in sweat, but a smile of relief spread across his face. Despite the intense pain, his eye had been restored. Dean Bohan, however, was visibly concerned. It appears that the more severe the injury and the deeper the curse, the more intense the pain during treatment, he mused aloud. I had planned 3 courses of treatment, but I underestimated how the patient would feel. Based on Alastor's reaction, if we continue, he might not be able to endure it, Bohan added, worry creasing his brow. Moody, though weak, managed a smile. What does it matter, old Bohan? If I can be restored to my former self, I can bear any pain. Bohan replied gravely, This is no trivial matter, Alastor. I must consult with Blake to see if I'm using the spell incorrectly. I recall Sylvanus' injury wasn't as severe, and he never mentioned such pain. Meanwhile, at Hogwarts, Dumbledore confronted Blake and Hermione in the Forbidden Forest during a nighttime stroll. Upon hearing about Moody's ordeal, Blake was visibly shocked. I forgot to teach Dean Bohan the anesthetic spell. But, Blake paused, a thought occurring to him, is it possible to use a stunning spell to knock Moody out during the treatment? Dumbledore, Blake, and Hermione shared a moment of silence, pondering the implications. P.S. In recent days, I've been suffering from a frozen shoulder. Right. Chapter 314, Dumbledore's Dilemma and Hermione's Plea. Faced with Blake's seemingly innocent expression and the turmoil within his soul, even Dumbledore, the most revered wizard of the century, found himself in an awkward position. He stroked his beard, searching for the right words. Actually, we refrained from using the coma spell, he began, his voice tinged with caution. We were uncertain if it would interfere with the limb regeneration spell. That's why I hesitated to cast it rashly. Blake was on the verge of protesting again when he caught the slight narrowing of Dumbledore's eyes. Do you have any questions? Dumbledore inquired, his tone calm yet firm. Clearing his throat, Blake quickly adjusted his stance. Ahem. You're right, Professor. Caution is paramount when treating patients. His swift change of heart wasn't due to cowardice, but a genuine understanding of the situation. Dumbledore, momentarily taken aback by Blake's quick compliance, couldn't help but let out a chuckle. Ahem. According to the school rules, nighttime wandering and entering the Forbidden Forest are strictly prohibited, Dumbledore continued, his expression turning serious as he addressed both Blake and Hermione. Hermione, trembling slightly, looked at the headmaster with a mix of fear and regret. If only she had known better, she would have never agreed to Blake's proposal for a nocturnal adventure in the Forbidden Forest. Professor, please don't expel us. We promise never to do it again, she pleaded, her voice barely above a whisper. Actually, it was my idea to visit the Forbidden Forest tonight. I've read so much about it and was incredibly curious. So I convinced Blake to accompany me. It's all my fault. This wasn't the first time Hermione had broken school rules under Blake's influence, but it was the first time they had been caught red-handed. Despite her panic, she instinctively took full responsibility for their actions, a gesture that deeply touched Blake. He reached out, affectionately ruffling her hair. Silly, Professor Dumbledore isn't planning to expel us. Why are you worrying so much? He reassured her. It was then that Hermione remembered overhearing Dumbledore and McGonagall discussing patient treatment when they first arrived. If expulsion had been on the table, they would have been sent to the headmaster's office immediately. not engaged in casual conversation. Dumbledore, observing the exchange with a smile, interjected, "While I have no intention of expelling you, that doesn't mean there won't be consequences." Blake's confident demeanor faltered slightly. It seemed Dumbledore wasn't going to let them off the hook so easily. Despite the looming threat of punishment, Blake tried to reassure Hermione. "It's okay. Being expelled for breaking school rules isn't the end of the world. It's not like we've broken the law. The worst they can do is expel us, not snap our wands." He was technically correct. The Ministry of Magic reserved wand breaking for severe offenses, such as breaches of the Statute of Secrecy or causing harm to others. For mere rule breaking, especially without causing harm, the Ministry was unlikely to take such drastic measures. Dumbledore, listening to Blake's rationalization, couldn't help but admire the young wizard's spirit. However, as headmaster, he had to uphold the school's rules. "While I appreciate your perspective, the rules are in place for a reason. As such, I must deduct points from your respective houses as a consequence of your actions tonight." The atmosphere tensed as Dumbledore prepared to announce the punishment, a reminder that actions, no matter how well-intentioned, have consequences. Expulsion from Hogwarts is a serious matter, as evidenced by Hagrid's case. When Hagrid was expelled, his wand was broken, and he was forbidden from using magic, a decision driven by the Ministry of Magic's prejudice against half-giants. They viewed this as a way to neutralize the perceived threat Hagrid posed. This incident highlights the Ministry's discriminatory stance towards those of mixed heritage. Similarly, the renowned magizoologist Newt Scamander faced repercussions for his involvement with dangerous magical creatures. Despite Dumbledore's defense, Scamander was dismissed, though he was allowed to keep his wand, unlike Hagrid. Blake and Hermione, facing expulsion for breaking school rules without causing harm or breaching confidentiality laws, had less to fear from the Ministry. Given Grindelwald's influence within the Ministry, it seemed unlikely they would face severe consequences like wand breaking. Blake reassured Hermione, explaining that as expelled students, they would essentially be muggles, free from the Ministry's jurisdiction. He suggested they could leave the UK and continue their education at Ilvermorny in the United States or Beauxbatons in France, leveraging his connections with notable alumni from both schools. Alternatively, they could consider the newly established academy in Austria, which had minimal admission requirements. Dumbledore, overhearing Blake's plans, was visibly upset. The idea of students considering transfer to other magical institutions, especially Nurmengard, known for its dark associations, was troubling to him. He had only intended to deduct points from them as a symbolic punishment, not to push them towards such drastic measures. Hermione, initially fearful of a future without magic and the prospect of returning to a mundane life after abandoning her Muggle education for Hogwarts, found solace in Blake's words. She realized that as someone without the conspicuous heritage of a half-giant like Hagrid, she could potentially evade the Ministry's oversight by relocating outside the UK. This revelation offered her a glimmer of hope in an otherwise bleak situation. Corner and every whisper in the shadows were not beyond Dumbledore's keen senses. Hermione, always a stickler for rules, found herself in a whirlwind of emotions. The realization that they were not expelled, but instead had a somewhat lenient punishment, made her reassess her understanding of the school's disciplinary system. It was clear that Dumbledore held Blake in high regard, fearing the potential consequences of pushing him away. "Even if I change my nationality, will the British Ministry of Magic still be able to control a wizard from another country?" Hermione pondered, her mind racing with possibilities. "If that doesn't work, we could always keep our names anonymous. If we continue to challenge the Ministry of Magic, Blake and I might just become two notorious dark wizards." Despite the gravity of the situation, Hermione couldn't help but feel a thrill at the thought. As a Gryffindor, she never lacked courage, and the idea of standing up against the system with Blake by her side was oddly exhilarating. However, reality was far from her wild musings. Dumbledore, the wise and understanding headmaster, would not expel a student for mere rule-breaking. His conversation with Blake revealed a deeper concern, one that went beyond the confines of school regulations. "Blake, I'm the headmaster, correct?" Dumbledore asked, a hint of weariness in his voice. "Yes," Blake replied, his tone nonchalant. "And I caught you breaking school rules, did I not?" "That's correct." "Then shouldn't you at least pretend to respect my authority and accept the consequences?" Blake hesitated, then conceded. "That does seem reasonable." "Very well. Then you have no objections to me deducting 20 points from each house?" "No. It was my idea to venture into the Forbidden Forest at night. Hermione tried to stop me. She shouldn't lose points for my actions." Dumbledore, touched by Blake's defense of Hermione, proposed a compromise. "How about a lesser deduction, then?" "That would be acceptable. I wouldn't want Hermione to face Professor McGonagall's disappointment." The onlookers, including Hermione, were stunned by the exchange. Since when did rule breakers negotiate their punishments? And why did Dumbledore seem almost hesitant to enforce the rules? Hermione was unaware of the special place Blake held in Dumbledore's heart, nor did she understand the headmaster's fears. Dumbledore was concerned that pushing Blake too hard might drive him to a darker path, one that had been trodden by Dark Lords before him. The peace that had been so hard won was fragile, and Dumbledore was determined to prevent the rise of another Dark Lord, especially one from his own family. After their meeting with Dumbledore, Blake and Hermione retreated to the Room of Requirement, a place filled with Blake's dangerous and forbidden experiments. Hermione, still processing the events, took a moment to gather her thoughts. "Blake, why do I get the feeling that Professor Dumbledore is afraid of you transferring to another school?" she asked, finally voicing her suspicion. Blake, after a burp, gestured to his surroundings, filled with hazardous plants and magical experiments. "I've been working on these projects for so long, yet I've barely scratched the surface," he explained. "Dumbledore knows I can't achieve my goals while strictly adhering to school rules. He's never questioned my methods or the source of my experimental data." Hermione was taken aback. "So, you believe he's been aware of our activities all along?" Blake nodded, a mischievous smile on his face. "In Hogwarts, nothing escapes the headmaster's notice. This ancient castle, it's alive." Hermione struggled to grasp the concept of the castle being alive, but she understood the implication of Blake's words. Dumbledore was likely aware of their actions, if not the specifics, then certainly the gist. In the grand scheme of things, their nighttime escapade in the Forbidden Forest was a minor transgression, especially considering the potential Dumbledore saw in Blake. The portrait hanging on the wall serves as the headmaster's spy. And the ghosts. Is there any corner of the castle they cannot infiltrate? Not to mention the hundreds of house elves in the kitchen, ever ready to heed the headmaster's commands. Blake was acutely aware of the unnerving ability of creatures like house elves to surveil individuals. Even now, without activating his Eye of Reality, he couldn't pinpoint Baker's location. Yet, he was confident that a mere call from him would suffice for Baker to materialize instantly before him. In Dumbledore's presence, Hogwarts harbored scarcely any secrets. This was especially true for young wizards like Hermione or Cassandra, who lacked the Eye of Truth and were thus blind to the shadows lurking in obscurity. But Blake was an exception. Even before acquiring the Eye of Truth, he possessed an innate authority that enhanced his perception, allowing him to sense unseen watchers. Therefore, Blake decided to let Dumbledore in on only what he chose to reveal. As for the matters he preferred to keep private, such as opening a box, he had devised a clever workaround. Blake had taken to stepping into a mirror space before proceeding with the unboxing, a strategy that might seem overly cautious to some. However, considering Dumbledore's position and the fact that even his own kin were under surveillance, Blake felt justified in his caution. In his shoes, Blake reasoned, he would undoubtedly pay close attention to a relative with such unique capabilities. Chapter 315. Shock! Lockhart is gay, the unforeseen confession. The events of the night had left Hermione feeling quite astounded. "It's rather outrageous, isn't it?" she mused. "Not to mention, we've broken so many school rules, yet we've had so few points deducted." "That's Dumbledore for you. He can be a bit eccentric," Blake replied, giving Hermione a puzzled look. "Isn't it better to lose some points rather than face expulsion? Do you actually wish for us to be expelled?" Hermione's cheeks flushed with embarrassment upon hearing this. Deep down, during their escapade in the Forbidden Forest, she had harbored a fleeting thought of them being expelled together. I never said that, Hermione stammered, unwilling to admit her wild musings. However, the change in her expression did not go unnoticed by Blake. Could it be that you were hoping for both of us to be expelled, so that you could? Blake teased, catching Hermione off guard. Hiss. I didn't expect you to think like that, Hermione, he continued, his words making Hermione both embarrassed and annoyed. You're talking nonsense. I'm not, she protested, though her denial sounded feeble against Blake's amused expression. Unable to bear it any longer, Hermione declared, I'm going back, and turned towards the door of the room of requirement. Leaving already? Blake called after her. What else? Hermione retorted. What if you run into Professor McGonagall or Mr. Filch and get sent to the headmaster's office? Blake's question halted Hermione in her tracks. Having just left Dumbledore's presence, she dreaded the thought of explaining another late-night wander. Turning back to Blake, Hermione bit her lip and asked, Can you give me a ride? Or perhaps you could stay? Blake suggested, sitting seductively on the edge of his luxurious bed and patting the empty space beside him. There's room here. Get out of here, Hermione snapped, her alertness spiking. Who else has been here? Cassandra? Cassandra? I asked, but she refused, Blake replied, causing Hermione to seethe with jealousy. How dare you suggest another girl stay here with you? She fumed. Together? I never said that, Blake clarified, his shock evident. I meant you could rest here, and I'd return to my dormitory. Hiss, don't you see? I wanted to be with you, Hermione realized, her anger matching that of Cassandra's. You're infuriating, she exclaimed, her emotions of shame and anger palpable. As the system announced her emotional turmoil, Hermione's face flushed with embarrassment. You're so annoying. With that, she turned and fled the room of requirement, running into a dimensional door that led directly to the Gryffindor common room. The fat lady, taken aback by Hermione's sudden appearance, grumbled about the temperaments of young people today, before reluctantly opening the passage. The next morning, the Great Hall of Hogwarts was unusually quiet. The silence was due to the latest edition of the Daily Prophet, which had just been delivered by Owl. The front-page headline was no longer about Blake's life-extending potion, but instead featured Gilderoy Lockhart in bold letters, proclaiming, Shocking! Gilderoy Lockhart is gay? Gilderoy Lockhart, a renowned and flamboyant author, was buzzing with excitement. Known for his charismatic charm and a penchant for the dramatic, Lockhart had recently been the subject of a rather peculiar article. The piece boldly claimed, with a list of top 10 supporting evidences, that Lockhart had a specific interest in middle-aged wizards with a certain sinister allure. The article even went as far as to caution these wizards to wear less black and maintain a constant smile to evade Lockhart's attention. Despite the odd nature of these claims, Lockhart remained in high spirits, especially after receiving a portrait of himself from his #1 fan, Gladys Gudgeon. The portrait, which captured Lockhart in a rather flamboyant pose, was not only a perfect reflection of his aesthetic, but also came in a lavish elle de frame. Overjoyed, Lockhart had even signed it with his extravagant peacock feather quill, adding an extra touch of flair. However, Lockhart's good mood was short-lived. As he made his way to the auditorium for breakfast, he couldn't help but notice the strange looks he was receiving from everyone he passed. The usual adoration in the eyes of his admirers seemed to have been replaced with something else entirely. Even the boys seemed to go out of their way to avoid him, whispering and pointing as he passed. Confused and slightly concerned, Lockhart encountered Severus Snape, whose expression was as dour as ever. Snape's reaction only added to Lockhart's bewilderment, prompting him to question what was amiss. Snape, having read the morning's Daily Prophet, was understandably cautious. The article's description of Lockhart's supposed type bore an uncanny resemblance to Snape himself, despite the victim's identity being obscured. Snape's guarded demeanor only fueled Lockhart's curiosity, leading him to inquire about the day's news. Upon learning that he was the subject of the front-page headline, Lockhart's worries evaporated, replaced by a surge of excitement. Convinced that the article was another piece of adoration, he hurried towards the auditorium, oblivious to the true nature of the story and the wary glances of those around him. As Lockhart approached the auditorium, his smile remained undimmed, a testament to his unshakable confidence. However, the whispers and odd looks continued, a stark contrast to the admiration he was accustomed to. Unbeknownst to him, the article had cast a shadow over his usual charm, leaving Lockhart blissfully unaware of the brewing storm of rumors and speculation. As the group of young wizards walked, they couldn't help but whisper among themselves, their voices a mixture of shock and pity. Seeing him smile like that, it reminded me of what was in the newspaper. I shuddered immediately. Could the victim reported in the newspaper actually be Professor Snape? That's impossible, isn't it? But you said your name was Ackerman Allen? You're being naive. That's clearly a pseudonym. Who would reveal their real name while trying to stay anonymous? Their conversation was punctuated by requests for flowers, a sign of their youthful naivety. Yes, and look at that photo. Even though the face is obscured, the clothes, the style, the hair, the color of the hair, it all points to one person. They gasped in unison. The victim turned out to be Professor Snape. No wonder Loha Temple had such a bright smile after speaking with Professor Snape just now. Poor Professor Snape. According to the book, Lockhart is so powerful that Snape couldn't stand a chance. The group of young wizards continued their gossip, unaware of the chill creeping up their spines until they felt something was amiss and turned around. To their horror, they were met with Snape's sinister glare. 50 points from Gryffindor, Snape declared, his voice cold. Meanwhile, when Lockhart entered the auditorium, the bustling room fell into an eerie silence. Everyone's eyes were on him, but not for the reasons he expected. Blake was the only one diligently working, paying no mind to Lockhart's entrance. Lockhart was taken aback by the unusual reception. Could it be that one of my admirers has written a flattering article about me? He wondered, convinced that this was the reason for the attention. Greeting Professor McGonagall with a cheerful, "Good morning, Minerva," Lockhart was met with a cold stare. "Professor Lockhart, we do not concern ourselves with your private life, but it is advisable that you keep your special interests outside of Hogwarts," McGonagall advised before leaving the auditorium, leaving Lockhart bewildered. Lockhart's confusion was short-lived as he noticed the owl with the newspaper on his seat. Eagerly, he took the newspaper, expecting to find adoring headlines about himself. However, his smile quickly faded, replaced by a livid expression as his hands trembled with rage. "Rita Skeeter, this is slander," Lockhart roared, storming out of the auditorium with the newspaper in hand. Blake, having just finished his meal, watched Lockhart's furious departure with a smirk. "Rita's skills are indeed remarkable. My first move, and it's a direct hit," he thought, amused by the chaos he had instigated. The report, of course, was entirely fabricated, a clever ruse by Rita to stir controversy. The rumor that Lockhart was gay was designed to unsettle his predominantly female fanbase, particularly the middle-aged and elderly women who adored him. The mere suggestion was enough to cause a stir, planting seeds of doubt and reducing his following, even if not everyone believed the rumor. Blake was content with the initial impact, knowing that the full effect would take time to unfold. Rita, too, was patient, ready to escalate the situation once the rumor had sufficiently permeated the wizarding community. This was just the beginning of their plan to shake Lockhart's world. In due course, the second lesson was revealed, the art of discrediting someone. Rita Skeeter had become a master of this craft. Now, with the Daily Prophet's endorsement of her articles, she no longer had to fret over the possibility of her submissions being rejected. Her adversary, Gilderoy Lockhart, on the other hand, might not be so fortunate. Rita exclaimed, "I have never been so wealthy in my life." Her statement was not just about financial gain. It was a testament to the power and influence she had amassed through her writing. Rita Skeeter's articles, known for their sensationalism and lack of regard for the truth, had made her a formidable figure in the wizarding world. The Daily Prophet, a widely read newspaper within the magical community, had become her platform to sway public opinion and shape perceptions. Lockhart, once celebrated for his supposed heroic deeds, found himself in a precarious position. Rita's pen had the power to elevate or destroy reputations, and Lockhart was acutely aware of the threat she posed. The battle of wits and influence between the two was a spectacle, with Rita seemingly holding the upper hand. As Rita reveled in her newfound wealth and influence, she couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought her to this pinnacle. Her articles, often criticized for their lack of integrity, had nonetheless captivated the reader's imagination, making her an indispensable asset to the Daily Prophet. The ability to discredit someone, to weave narratives that could uplift or demolish, had become her most potent weapon. In the world of wizarding journalism, Rita Skeeter had carved out a niche for herself, one that was both feared and admired. Her success was a reminder of the power of the written word and the impact it could have on the lives of those it touched. For better or worse, Rita had become a force to be reckoned with, her name synonymous with scandal and intrigue. Chapter 316, Confusion. Marrying your daughter, doesn't your wealth become mine? What? My manuscript was rejected, Lockhart exclaimed, tearing the rejection letter into pieces. This is outrageous. Over the years, Lockhart had faced manuscript rejections before, but this time it stung differently. Rita Skeeter's baseless accusations had pushed him to the edge. His initial reaction was to craft a rebuttal to silence Rita. Yet, his counterattack article remained unwritten. Ridiculous. They claim my manuscript contains vulgar language. How then did Rita's article get published? Lockhart was seething with anger. Silence would only imply consent, betraying his own fans' trust. No, I cannot let this stand. I'm going to sue her, Lockhart declared, his resolve hardening. I'll sue her for defamation and for tarnishing my reputation. He thought of his colleagues' judgmental glances and the students' odd stares, driving him to the brink of madness. Although not everyone believed the slanderous articles, the damage to his reputation was palpable, evidenced by the dwindling fan mail. Meanwhile, Blake was immersed in the study of soul magic within the room of requirement, a stark contrast to Lockhart's turmoil. Seated comfortably in an armchair, he examined a diary with a black cover on the table before him. Hovering above the diary was a translucent soul, resembling blue smoke, the remnant soul of Voldemort contained within the Horcrux. The soul, appearing to be a boy around 15 or 16, floated motionlessly with its eyes shut tight, unresponsive to Blake's prodding with his wand. Blake, with eyes glowing golden, scrutinized the soul before him through the lens of reality. His curiosity about the soul was undiminished by his success in healing the Longbottoms with his wand. The Horcrux presented an unparalleled opportunity for research. The remnant soul appears intact, with no missing limbs, Blake mused, puzzled. He had initially believed the soul to be incomplete. With a sudden inspiration, Blake cast a spell on the soul. The soul's form shifted dramatically. Part of it solidified, while the rest faded. Could it be that the faded portion represents what's missing from the soul, and the solid part its true essence? Blake theorized, likening the soul to a jar of water that appears whole due to its unchanging shape. As he documented his observations, the soul slowly opened its eyes, looking around in confusion before fixing its gaze on Blake with a mixture of shock and anger. "What have you done to me?" the soul, Tom, demanded. "I'm conducting vital research," Blake replied nonchalantly. "Research? What kind of research?" Tom's confusion was evident. "Let me simplify it for you," Blake said, closing his notebook. "I'm exploring the nature of wizarding souls, particularly those that are incomplete, and you, my friend, are contributing to this noble cause." "What did you say?" Tom's anger was palpable. To him, being labeled as a mere contributor was an insult. In his eyes, he was always superior, never a mere subject for experimentation. Blake's smile widened as he effortlessly waved his wand, causing Tom Riddle to float sideways in the air. After a moment, Tom gently descended, standing before Blake with a mixture of surprise and anger. "There's no need for such anger, Tom," Blake said, his voice calm and almost teasing. "Consider this. I've conducted numerous experiments on you, and yet you remain unharmed." Tom's eyes widened in disbelief. "You just picked up the diary today. How could you have experimented on me so many times?" he questioned, his voice laced with suspicion and a growing realization. "Wait, have you been using the Obliviate curse on me repeatedly? You despicable fiend! How dare you tamper with my memory?" Tom's curses flew at Blake, each one earning Blake another golden treasure chest from the system. Leaning back comfortably in his chair, Blake watched Tom with an amused smile, the wand in his hand tracing intricate patterns in the air. He waited patiently for Tom to exhaust his repertoire of insults. "Are you done?" Blake finally asked, his tone light. "With all due respect, your talent for hurling insults falls far short of your other abilities. It's quite disappointing, really, but then again, it's normal for a wizard of your caliber to be above such things." This only served to reignite Tom's fury. He started, but his voice gradually faded, not from a lack of desire to continue his tirade, but from sheer exhaustion. Blake, meanwhile, had reclined further into his armchair, seemingly engrossed in Tom's ranting. To Tom's astonishment and frustration, Blake had actually fallen asleep. The system's notification of "extremely angry emotion detected," followed by "congratulations to the host for getting a golden treasure chest," roused Blake from his slumber. He opened his sleepy eyes to find Tom still fuming. "Are you finished?" "I was planning to go back to sleep after your scolding," Blake said, yawning. In disbelief, Tom tried to continue his curses, but before he could finish, Blake waved his wand, and Tom's spectral form was forcibly returned to the diary. With Tom's soul safely contained, Blake saw no reason to engage further. As Tom's soul merged back with the diary, a stream of curses, all beginning with F, erupted from the pages. Blake paid them no mind, knowing well that Tom's vocabulary of insults was limited and unimpressive. With a swift motion, Blake cast a spell, Obliviate, and the diary fell silent. He then stored the diary in the system warehouse, mentally thanking Tom for his unwitting contribution to Blake's mastery of soul magic. Having dealt with Tom, Blake decided it was time to visit St. Mungo's. He packed his belongings and left the room of requirement, heading towards the dormitory. As he rounded a corner on the 3rd floor, he was stopped by a dark figure. Severus Snape stood before him, his eyes smoldering with barely contained rage. "Oh, hello, Severus. Were you looking for me?" Blake greeted him nonchalantly. "Don't call me Severus," Snape snapped, his anger palpable. "Is the Lockhart expose in the newspaper you're doing?" Snape demanded, his voice a mix of anger and accusation. Blake admitted openly, "Yes, it was me. What about it, Severus? Are you planning to complain to Lockhart?" Snape's frustration was evident. "Why drag me into your mess with him?" Blake realized that the description of the victim in the newspaper bore a striking resemblance to Snape, causing him undue stress. Colleagues and students alike had been looking at Snape with a mix of pity and amusement, a change in perception that Snape attributed to the damning article and its accompanying photograph, which resembled him to an uncanny degree. "And that's because the face is covered," Blake exclaimed, a hint of desperation in his voice. I want to say that this was actually an accident. Do you believe me?" Snape fixed Blake with a cold, unyielding stare. "Tell me, should I believe you?" "But this really was just an accidental injury," Blake insisted. "The person in the photograph is Ackerman Allen, as you've seen before. He's merely a faceless model," Blake continued, trying to explain. "It's just that his attire and demeanor bear a slight resemblance to yours. This truly is a coincidence," he said, his expression one of aggrieved innocence. "I might as well believe in ghosts," Snape retorted sharply. "I'll have you know this matter is far from settled. Given that what you didn't want to happen has already occurred, what do you propose we do?" Blake asked, spreading his hands in a gesture of openness. Snape took a deep breath, his anger simmering. "More money. The dividend you've given me, it needs to be increased." Blake glanced at Snape, a hint of skepticism in his gaze. "You're just looking for an excuse to demand more money, aren't you?" Snape's expression turned livid, yet there was no system prompt to indicate his sincerity. This lack of reaction suggested that Snape might indeed be putting on an act. "Ridiculous. This is compensation for the damage to my reputation. I am entitled to it," Snape declared vehemently. Blake observed Snape for a long moment before finally conceding, "Okay, I'll give it to you." Just as a flicker of pride appeared in Snape's eyes, Blake added nonchalantly, "Actually, have you considered the possibility, if in the future I were to marry your daughter, wouldn't the money you earn from me and intend to leave to her ultimately still end up with me?" Snapey was taken aback, his reaction a mix of shock and disbelief. Chapter 317, A Shared Secret. Snape's glare intensified as he faced Blake, his teeth grinding audibly in frustration. "If you dare," he began, his voice laced with a warning. Blake, unfazed, shrugged nonchalantly. "You know, feelings can't be forced," he said, his tone light yet carrying an underlying seriousness. "Just like how some people can love without being loved in return, and sometimes love is uninvited yet finds a way." Before Snape could react, Blake's words seemed to pierce him, causing him to clutch his chest as if wounded. Taking several deep breaths, Snape regained his composure, his eyes narrowing. "If you harbor such intentions," he hissed, "you'd be wise to be cautious with every sip of water and every bite of food from now on. I have my ways of rendering you incapacitated," he added, his gaze dropping ominously to Blake's lower body. Blake caught the threatening look, feeling a sudden chill. Lockhart has always enjoyed popularity, receiving countless letters from fans daily. During Harry's detention, Lockhart had him reply to these fan letters, a task that took hours and still wasn't completed by evening, highlighting Lockhart's vast fan base. However, the frequency of these letters has recently diminished, and among the usual fan mail, there have been letters from a different kind of admirer. For instance, one letter in Lockhart's hands read, "I am gay too, and I was thrilled to learn you are as well. I've been curious about you for a long time." Enraged, Lockhart threw the letters into the fireplace, cursing. "Damn it, Rita Skeeter, this isn't over," he exclaimed, unsure of why Rita had targeted him, but knowing this wasn't the time to find out. He needed a platform to defend himself, but with the Daily Prophet turning its back on him, options were limited. The Wizarding World's media landscape was dominated by the Daily Prophet, leaving little room for alternative voices, especially those willing to challenge the status quo. Lockhart found himself at a dead end, with no publication willing to take his side against the Daily Prophet, the Ministry of Magic's unofficial mouthpiece. His attempts to counteract the smear campaign through legal action had been met with silence from the ministry. As he burned the letters, Lockhart's spirit sank. The vibrant confidence he once had was replaced by anxiety. "There must be a way out of this," he muttered to himself, a spark of determination lighting up his eyes. "Blake, he'll know what to do." Convinced that Blake could help him, especially considering the development plan he had sent, Lockhart hurried out of his office, leaving the door ajar in his haste. Meanwhile, Blake ventured out of Hogwarts Castle, wrapped in a robe transformed from his invisibility cloak, and made his way toward the Forbidden Forest. The snow crunched under his leather boots, the sound echoing in the cold air. "This weather is truly unbearable," Blake complained to himself. He had never been fond of winter, not just because of the cold, but for reasons more personal and profound. Senior students, enveloped in layers against the chill, traversed the grounds with less openness than the carefree days of summer. Blake, seizing a moment when attention was diverted elsewhere, veered off the main path leading from the castle and slipped into the shadowy embrace of the Forbidden Forest. Not far into his clandestine journey, a peculiar sound halted his steps. Pushing through a bush, its branches heavy with frost and snow, Blake encountered a sight few had the privilege to witness. A gathering of thestrals, ethereal creatures visible only to those who had seen death. As his breath formed a cloud of white mist in the cold air, Blake mused aloud, "Do you often come here to feed the thestrals?" "Yes," came the reply from Luna, who had turned to face him with a serene smile. "You're the first person who hasn't questioned my ability to see them." Luna, continuing her task, retrieved another piece of meat from her bag and tossed it to a nearby thestral. "Has anyone else seen you her?" Blake inquired. Luna nodded. "Professor Kettleburn. I feared he'd deduct points, but instead, he showed me how to properly feed these magnificent creatures and even gifted me a book on thestrals the following day." "He's quite the character, isn't he?" Blake leaned against a nearby tree, observing. Perhaps his interest was piqued because it's rare for a Ravenclaw to show such enthusiasm for magical beasts. It seems most enthusiasts, including Professor Kettleburn himself, are from Hufflepuff. "You might be right," Luna agreed, her head tilted in thought. Blake's gaze then fell to Luna's bare feet against the cold ground. "Why aren't you wearing shoes? Doesn't it get cold?" Luna, unfazed, threw another piece of meat to the thestrals. "I can never seem to find my shoes. It's quite odd, but I found a spell in the library recently that keeps my feet warm." Blake, skeptical, noticed the faint magical aura around Luna's feet. "You're not referring to the culinary charm used to keep food warm, are you?" Luna expressed surprise at his guess. "How did you know?" "Yes, I found it in a cookbook, but your feet aren't food, and overuse of that charm could be harmful." Blake's concern was justified. His eye of truth revealed damage to the skin on Luna's soles, a precursor to frostbite. The charm was evidently not as effective as Luna believed. With a pat on the tree beside him, Blake conjured a chair from its branches, inviting Luna to sit. "Let me take care of your feet." Luna, intrigued by the magic, complied. "This is incredible. Can you teach me?" Blake hesitated. "This is druid magic, not easily replicated without a deep connection to nature." Despite this, Luna remained fascinated by the chair that had grown from the tree. Blake then cast a healing charm on her feet, which immediately began to feel warmer and slightly itchy, a sign of healing. "There might be some discomfort, but it's the healing process at work," Blake explained, casting another spell that enveloped Luna's feet in a warm, comforting glow. "This is the true warmth-keeping spell. It's as warm as spring." Luna, feeling the warmth spread, smiled. "Warm as spring? What a peculiar yet wonderful spell." Blake nodded in agreement. "It's a spell that truly brings comfort, much like the warmth of spring itself." As Luna Lovegood stood in the snow, a sudden whooshing sound caught her attention. A pair of shoes magically flew towards her, landing neatly before her eyes. Her curiosity piqued. She marveled at the enchantment. "What kind of magic is this?" "It's a flying charm," came the reply. Eager to learn, Luna's face lit up. "Can you teach me?" "Of course," Blake responded with a smile, pleased by her enthusiasm. "With this spell, you won't have to worry about losing your shoes ever again." Puzzled, Luna inquired, "Why is that?" "Because I've enchanted your shoes with a spell that ensures they'll never be lost," Blake explained, a hint of mystery in his voice. Luna glanced down at her shoes, feeling an unexpected warmth. "Thank you, Blake," she said, gratitude evident in her voice. "You're welcome. Did you think I came here just for this?" Blake teased, rubbing his hands together for warmth. Curiosity piqued, Luna asked, "What do you want from me?" It was unusual for Blake to seek her out in the Forbidden Forest. "I came to borrow a book from you," Blake revealed, his request surprising Luna. "A book? What book of mine could possibly interest you?" Luna asked, genuinely puzzled. Blake's request was simple, yet unexpected. "Can you lend me the latest edition of the Quibbler?" Luna's eyes sparkled with delight as she eagerly rummaged through her satchel. She always carried a copy of the Quibbler, a magazine founded by her father, despite its modest circulation. Blake's interest in her magazine filled her with joy. After lending Blake the magazine, Luna returned to feeding Yeji, her magical creature. This time, however, her feet remained warm, thanks to Blake's enchantment. Meanwhile, Blake settled into a magically grown chair, engrossed in Rhea, Ding, the Quibbler. Once Luna finished her task, she found Blake had also completed his reading. Eagerly, she asked, "How do you feel about it?" Blake knew the importance of his response. "It's quite novel, Luna, and I like it," he said, not wanting to disappoint her. "But it's true that its uniqueness might not appeal to everyone." Luna, ever hopeful, asked if there was a way to make the magazine more appealing to a broader audience. Blake had a plan. "The issue is not the novelty, but the lack of visual evidence and relatable stories. For example, articles about the horned Snorlax or the harassing fly lack photos or first-hand encounters, making them seem less credible." Confused, Luna wondered how they could possibly obtain photos of creatures they had never seen. Blake revealed he knew a spell that could draw out these elusive creatures. "I'll bring them out, and you'll capture the photos," he proposed. Excited at the prospect, Luna agreed, imagining the positive impact this could have on the Quibbler's sales. Blake then expressed a desire to meet Luna's father, hoping to discuss the magazine's content with him. Luna, thrilled by the idea, suggested Blake visit her home during Christmas. Blake agreed, suggesting Luna write to her father to arrange the visit. As they finalized their plans, Blake couldn't help but feel a twinge of guilt, comparing himself to a trickster. Yet, the prospect of improving the Quibbler and meeting Luna's father overshadowed his doubts. Upon returning to the castle, Blake encountered Gilderoy Lockhart, who seemed almost desperate for Blake's attention. Lockhart's expression, bordering on tears, suggested he was in dire need of assistance. In a hushed tone, Filled with desperation, Lockhart pleaded, "Blake, you must save me." He quickly confided in Blake, sharing the depth of his troubles. Blake, with a knowing smile, responded, "Are you seeking a platform to voice your concerns?" Lockhart, his situation dire, nodded vigorously. The luxury of choosing a prestigious platform was beyond his reach. His immediate need was to find any medium willing to let him speak. "Have you ever heard of the Quibbler?" Blake inquired, the smile still playing on his lips. "The Quibbler?" Lockhart echoed, a mix of confusion and curiosity in his voice. It was apparent he had never come across such a publication. "Well, you're about to become quite familiar with it," Blake assured him, his tone suggesting that the Quibbler would soon play a significant role in Lockhart's quest to be heard. Chapter 318, Blake's Dark Lord Behavior. Luna Lovegood walked into the Ravenclaw common room, her heart brimming with excitement. She had just returned from the school owlery, where she sent a letter to her father, Mr. Lovegood, on behalf of Blake. The thought of possibly seeing a Thestral, or even a Snorkack, filled her with joy. As she skipped back to her dormitory, two girls lounging in armchairs nearby couldn't help but notice her, particularly her shoes. "Didn't you hang her shoes on the ceiling of the corridor?" one girl whispered to the other. "Yes, I did," the other replied with a smirk. "Then how did she get them back?" "Maybe the shoe fell off," the first girl guessed, puzzled. "Next time, let's hang them on the Whomping Willow," the second girl suggested with a mischievous grin. "How would we do that?" "Just throw them over." Meanwhile, in the boys' dormitory, a niffler named Dabao was making a scene. With one paw on his hip and the other pointing accusingly at Blake, Dabao chattered angrily. Blake hadn't returned to the dormitory for quite some time, and Dabao had taken to lounging on Blake's bed, comfortably nestled under the covers while enjoying a piece of cheesecake. Unaware of Dabao's presence, Blake sat down on the bed, flattening the cake in the process. Reacting quickly, he apologized to the niffler. "Ahem. Sorry. I'll treat you to cake next time. I didn't see you hiding there. Could you please not be so stingy?" "Wait, you're eating cheesecake under there?" Blake exclaimed, surprised. Dabao paused his chattering, only to resume with even more vigor, accusing Blake of neglecting cleanliness and questioning if Blake had other nifflers he was attending to instead. Blake, unfazed, slowly took out 5 gold galleons and placed them on the bed. Dabao's complaints ceased immediately as he snatched up the coins with impressive speed. "Why did you come back?" Dabao asked, his tone shifting. "I need to make it appear as though I'm resting in the dormitory, but I actually have to leave," Blake explained. He had been leaving Hogwarts frequently, and Dumbledore had started to take notice. To avoid raising further suspicion, Blake decided not to inform Dumbledore about his visit to Mr. Lovegood. After casting a cleaning spell on the quilt at Dabao's request, Blake opened a dimensional door and vanished from the dormitory. Back in the Ravenclaw girls' dormitory, Luna, now in slippers, headed towards the bathroom for a bath. Shortly after she left, the two girls who had been plotting to steal her shoes sneaked in. They approached Luna's bed with a smile, eyeing the shoes placed in front of it. However, as they reached out to grab the shoes, they suddenly sprang to life. One shoe flew up and struck one of the girls on the head. "Hey!" she exclaimed, startled by the unexpected turn of events. The two girls, having narrowly escaped the peculiar assault of the enchanted shoes, dashed out of the common room, their laughter and panic trailing behind them like the echo of a bizarre dream. The shoes, seemingly satisfied with their mischief, bounced back to the dormitory, their task complete. Luna Lovegood, who had returned to retrieve forgotten belongings, witnessed this odd spectacle. The shoes, upon realizing they were observed, ceased their antics. Luna, with a curious gleam in her eye, picked up the shoes, marveling as they softly snored in her grasp, reminiscent of slumbering creatures. She recalled Blake's words from their adventure in the Forbidden Forest, a pair of shoes that will never be lost again. With a smile, Luna addressed the shoes with newfound affection. "You," pointing to the left shoe, "shall be named Brainless." Turning to the right, she declared, "and you will be known as Unhappy." That same night, in the village of Ottery St. Catchpole, nestled on a Devon hillside, Blake appeared as if conjured from thin air. His gaze swept over the quaint village, its boundaries marked by enchanted vine walls visible only to those versed in magic. Among the sights, the Weasleys' home state oohed out, a beacon of warmth and chaos. However, Blake's destination lay elsewhere, on a lesser hillside that housed Luna's unique abode. Opting for a more subtle approach, Blake retrieved his broom, gliding across the sky with the grace of a shadow. Soon, he arrived at the peculiar structure that was Luna's home, a cylindrical spire that seemed a fragment of a bygone era, crowned by a slender crescent moon. The symbolism was not lost on Blake. Luna, whose name echoed the celestial body, seemed perfectly matched to this whimsical dwelling. Blake dismounted, his feet touching the ground with a soft thud. Approaching the gate, he noted 3 hand-painted signs that spoke volumes of the occupants' eccentricities. With a gentle push, he entered the yard, a garden of oddities and wonders, including the bush of orange radish-shaped fruits Luna favored as earrings. A curious owl, perched on a nearby tree, greeted Blake with a quizzical cuckoo as he made his way to the heavy black door, adorned with an eagle-shaped knocker reminiscent of the one at Ravenclaw's common room. Knocking, he awaited the response. The door swung open to reveal Xenophilius Lovegood. His appearance as unconventional as his home greeted Blake with a mixture of surprise and warmth. "Are you the Blake Green Luna has written about?" he inquired, his voice tinged with curiosity. Blake, with a smile, confirmed, "Yes, Mr. Lovegood, I'm Blake. It's a pleasure to meet you." The handshake that followed was a bridge between 2 worlds, one of the mundane and the other of the extraordinary. Xenophilius, with a gleam of recognition, ushered Blake inside. "Luna has spoken highly of you, and I believe I've seen your name in the Daily Prophet." Blake, ever modest, attributed his notoriety to mere luck. Inside, the house mirrored its exterior's uniqueness, with furnishings that hugged the curved walls, creating a cozy, if unconventional, atmosphere. Xenophilius invited Blake to take a seat, moving with a haste that spoke of his eagerness to converse with the friend his daughter had so fondly mentioned. The warmth of the Lovegood home enveloped Blake, a stark contrast to the night's chill, as he settled into the armchair, ready to share tales of magic and friendship. Blake gathered all the manuscripts scattered across the table and tossed them aside. Suddenly, a series of peculiar noises emanated from the second floor, resembling the creaking of some machinery. Utilizing his unique ability, Blake's gaze penetrated the ceiling, revealing an ancient and peculiar machine operating upstairs. With each creak, a copy of the Quibbler was produced. It dawned on Blake that this contraption was, in fact, a printing press. "I heard you've come to discuss the Quibbler with me?" Lovegood greeted him with an enthusiastic smile, his excitement palpable. Luna had mentioned that Blake was a fan of the Quibbler, eager to visit and engage in conversation about the magazine. Capturing the interest of a fan, especially one as renowned in the wizarding world as Blake, was a delight for Lovegood. "Yes, that's precisely why I'm here," Blake responded, his smile mirroring Lovegood's excitement. "Wonderful!" Lovegood exclaimed. "Please, make yourself comfortable. I'll prepare some tea for you." He then added, with a hint of pride, "You must try my special Gertie root tea." With that, Lovegood hurried off to the kitchen, leaving Blake to peruse a new edition of The Quibbler. As Blake flipped through the pages, he couldn't help but feel a touch of admiration for Lovegood. Despite the Quibbler's lack of popularity, Lovegood had managed to support his daughter through its publication, a feat Blake found commendable. Upon his return, Lovegood was thrilled to see Blake engrossed in The Quibbler. He believed Blake genuinely appreciated his work. "What do you think of the latest issue? It's so fresh that even Luna hasn't seen it yet," Lovegood inquired, his eyes gleaming with anticipation. Not wanting to disappoint him, Blake nodded in approval. "The content is indeed very innovative, he remarked, bringing a smile to Lovegood's face. Blake mused internally that pleasing Mr. Lovegood was far simpler than satisfying certain other individuals. A mere compliment was enough to brighten Lovegood's day, whereas others demanded far more, yet remained difficult to appease. "Now, let's try that special Gertie root tea," Lovegood suggested, placing a cup before Blake and pouring a dark purple liquid that hardly resembled tea. Blake eyed the concoction warily, its aroma and appearance leaving much to be desired. Despite his reservations, Blake took a sip, his taste buds assaulted by a complex blend of sweet, sour, bitter, and spicy flavors. Surprisingly, the tea was quite refreshing, prompting Blake to take another sip. Lovegood's beaming smile indicated his approval. Does this tea also help to clear the mind? Blake inquired, still tasting the peculiar blend. Absolutely, Lovegood replied. It's perfect for those late nights spent writing when sleepiness becomes a hindrance. This sparked an idea in Blake's mind. Beyond magical potions, perhaps there was a market for uniquely flavored beverages. The potential was vast, but such plans would have to wait. For now, Blake continued his discussion with Mr. Lovegood about the Quibbler, both engrossed in a world of eccentricities and innovation. Zhao Liao Zhao's effusive praise left Mr. Lovegood feeling as if he were floating on air. However, Blake's next comment quickly brought him back down to earth. But if your magazine is so excellent, why isn't it more popular? Scratching his disheveled hair and frowning, Mr. Lovegood lamented. Exactly. Why doesn't anyone like it? Why doesn't anyone buy it? Blake took another sip of his gourdig root tea, then smiled reassuringly. Mr. Lovegood, do you trust me? If you do, I have a strategy to make the Quibbler widely popular. Really? That's wonderful. Overwhelmed by the wave of targeted praise he had just received, Mr. Lovegood already considered Blake a close confidant. Moreover, Blake was no ordinary boy. He was a recipient of the Order of Merlin, second class. If he claimed to have a solution, then there must indeed be one. Without hesitation, Mr. Lovegood expressed his trust in Blake. That's great to hear, Blake responded with a smile. Having witnessed how Gilderoy Lockhart was ruthlessly discredited by the Daily Prophet, Blake had come to deeply understand the influence of the media and public opinion. He yearned for a media outlet under his complete control. The Daily Prophet was influential, but it was an extension of Grindelwald's power, not his own. Blake was unwilling to place all his hopes on this platform. He reasoned that it was better to be prepared for any eventuality. Although Grindelwald currently played the roles of a loving father and a dutiful son, there was no guarantee that their relationship would remain harmonious forever. Thus, Blake planned to leverage the situation to his advantage, aiming to establish his own media company. This strategy was straightforward and risk-free. If it proved unnecessary, no harm was done, but if it became useful, it would serve as a powerful asset. Of course, Mr. Lovegood, brimming with joy, had no idea that Blake, whom he believed to be a fervent supporter, was in fact not genuinely invested in the magazine. Similarly, Blake failed to recognize the parallels between his actions and those of Tom Riddle in the past. Chapter 319, a new title and an unexpected proposal. After his initial excitement, Mr. Lovegood refilled Blake's teacup with gourdig root tea. Blake, I'm thrilled to officially announce that from today onwards, you are the deputy editor of the Quibbler. Blake was taken aback by the smoothness of this transition, but responded with genuine happiness. I'm honored by your trust in me, Mr. Lovegood. Mr. Lovegood's joy was palpable. It's been so many years since I founded the Quibbler. Finally, I've met someone who truly appreciates my work. So what are your plans for making our magazine more popular? It was clear that Mr. Lovegood had complete faith in Blake. Blake shared his thoughts. The essence of the Quibbler is its pursuit of the novel and the unique. The more novel, the better. Given human curiosity is boundless, our magazine should theoretically thrive as long as we can keep feeding that curiosity. Mr. Lovegood clapped his hands in agreement. Exactly. If only we had met sooner. You're too kind, Mr. Lovegood. Meeting now is not too late, Blake replied with a smile. In his excitement, Mr. Lovegood grasped Blake's hand. Please, don't call me Mr. Lovegood anymore. Call me Xenophilius. And since I'm only a bit older, you might as well call me Brother Xenophilius from now on. Blake quickly interjected, realizing the implications. Wait, that might not be appropriate. Your daughter Luna and I are classmates. If I were to call you brother, wouldn't that make Luna and me the same generation? The thought of Luna calling him Uncle Blake flashed through his mind, prompting a swift rejection of the idea. What does it matter? I call you brother, you call me. Mr. Lovegood paused, a sudden realization dawning on him. He then asked with a sly smile, Blake, what do you think of Luna? It might be a bit early, but if it were you, I wouldn't object. Blake nearly choked. Let's focus on discussing the Quibbler's revival for now. Mr. Lovegood's unexpected shift in demeanor took Blake by surprise, contrasting sharply with other acquaintances. All right, Mr. Lovegood conceded, returning to the matter at hand. Based on your analysis, we need to find ways to satisfy readers' curiosity. I've tried before, but without much success. The reason is quite simple, Blake explained. In the Quibbler, you've mentioned a creature called the Snorlax multiple times. It's a fascinating creature, yet it's never been documented in any magical animal books. The problem is, previous issues have mentioned it without providing any concrete evidence of its existence. No celebrity encounters, no pictures, not even a sketch. This lack of evidence likely leads readers to believe that the Snorlax is a fabrication, turning their curiosity into skepticism towards the Quibbler. Mr. Lovegood listened intently, realizing the gap in his approach. The conversation marked the beginning of a new chapter for the Quibbler, with Blake at the helm of its transformation. Xenophilius Lovegood's eyes sparkled with excitement as he addressed Blake. Do you truly believe in the existence of such creatures? Blake nodded confidently, his voice filled with conviction. Absolutely. These creatures most certainly exist. Not just the crumple-horned snorkack, but others like the nargles and the raxburts are real too. Seeing Blake's unwavering belief, Mr. Lovegood was momentarily lost in awe. He had always been a staunch believer in these mythical creatures, a belief he shared with his daughter, Luna. However, hearing such passionate affirmation from someone else was a first for him. It was as if he had found a kindred spirit, and the realization brought tears to his eyes, deeply moved by the connection. But Blake, Mr. Lovegood hesitated, a hint of embarrassment in his tone. Although these creatures exist, where can we find evidence of them? I must admit, I've never actually seen one with my own eyes. His voice trailed off, revealing his inner turmoil. It seemed his inability to witness these creatures firsthand was a source of shame, as if he felt he was letting Blake down. Blake, however, didn't question Mr. Lovegood's belief in the creature's existence, despite never having seen them. Instead, he reassured him with a confident smile. Leave that to me. Their habitat is in Sweden, right? I have a plan to locate these creatures and capture their images. I'll head to Sweden immediately. Really? Mr. Lovegood's voice trembled with excitement. I've been pursuing these creatures for many years without success. May I accompany you? Blake shook his head. No, Mr. Lovegood. Your duty lies with managing the Quibbler and continuing your writing. Leave the fieldwork to me. You start drafting the article, and I'll bring back evidence of the crumple-horned snorkack for you. As Blake prepared to leave the Lovegood residence, Mr. Lovegood's enthusiasm was palpable. He handed Blake a large bag of Gertie-root tea, a gesture Blake accepted graciously, pondering its potential to further endear him to Luna. Upon returning to Hogwarts and finding his dormitory empty, Blake didn't linger. He made his way to the room of requirement, deliberately passing by the portraits and paintings in the corridors, signaling to Dumbledore and anyone else paying attention that he was on a mission, not merely wandering. His destination was his secret base within the room of requirement, specifically the life laboratory that had been constructed at his request. This laboratory was concealed from all but Blake, ensuring that even Dumbledore could not stumble upon it. Inside the laboratory, Blake inspected an unknown creature in a petri dish, which increasingly resembled a jellyfish. It had recently entered a state of deep sleep, initiating a slow growth process. After checking on it, Blake set to work on constructing a second petri dish. Initially, he had considered using it to create a companion for Snape, but that project was not urgent. Now, however, he urgently needed to create a creature that had never before existed. Indeed, the crumple-horned snorkack, the creature he had promised to find, did not exist in the world. Even with the use of druid magic in Sweden, finding such a creature would be impossible. Blake's assurance to Mr. Lovegood stemmed from his belief in his own ability to cultivate this mythical creature through his expertise in magical biology. Blake was deep in conversation with Lovegood and Luna, discussing the concept of a bent-horned Snorlax, a creature that existed only in their imaginations. He was excited about the prospect of bringing such a creature to life through the use of advanced biological cultivation technology. Although creating a powerful creature might take time, Blake was determined to cultivate a bent-horned Snorlax that would be harmless to both humans and animals. He believed that achieving this would not only be a significant scientific breakthrough, but also a way to increase Luna's favorability towards him, not to mention the potential rewards from treasure chests. In addition to the Snorlax, Blake envisioned cultivating other fantastical creatures to feature in the Quibbler, enhancing the magazine's quality and reputation. He also saw an opportunity to leverage Gilderoy Lockhart's fame by featuring articles from Lockhart's wife, especially in response to Rita Skeeter's criticisms, which could further boost the magazine's popularity. After some time, Blake successfully created a second biological petri dish, using a significant portion of the alchemy materials he had acquired from low-level treasure chests. Despite the expenditure, Blake saw the investment as necessary and beneficial since the petri dish could be reused for future experiments. Working tirelessly in the room of requirement, Blake spent the entire night cultivating the bent-horned Snorlax. He meticulously mixed the blood of various magical animals, such as the poison-horned beast and the horned camelback, in precise proportions, pouring the concoction into the petri dish. The next morning, exhausted and with dark circles under his eyes, he made his way to the great hall for breakfast. As he rounded a corner, still half asleep, he accidentally bumped into Professor Babbling, causing an awkward and embarrassing moment. Blake quickly apologized, insisting it was an accident, but Professor Babbling teased him, questioning his intentions. Realizing he had neglected his studies in ancient runes with Professor Babbling, Blake sought to make amends. He presented her with a bottle of his newly created beauty potion, explaining its benefits and offering her a special discount at his magic beauty salon in Diagon Alley. The gesture seemed to please Professor Babbling, who accepted the apology and the gift with a hint of joy. Blake's innovative approach to blending magic and science, along with his entrepreneurial spirit, showcased his unique talents and ambitions. However, his interactions with Professor Babbling also highlighted the importance of maintaining relationships and responsibilities amidst his pursuits. No one doubted Blake's proficiency in potion-making. Thus, when he spoke of the effects of his latest concoction, Professor Babbling was inclined to believe him, her skepticism overshadowed by an evident trust in his skills. "Then, I must thank you, and well, don't forget to consider enrolling in my class next year," Professor Babbling said before she turned and departed. At that moment, Blake felt a surge of alertness wash over him. He considered himself fortunate to have brought along a bottle of beauty potion. Touching his forehead, he marveled at the smoothness of his skin. A small victory, but a victory nonetheless. Upon entering the auditorium, Blake made his way directly to his own canteen, where Nagini and Baker were diligently restocking shelves. "Good morning, Blake," greeted Nagini, noticing Blake's arrival. "Good morning, Nagini," Blake replied, his voice trailing off, a hint of hesitation in his tone. Catching on to Blake's demeanor, Nagini couldn't help but smile. "So where is it you're planning to drag me off to this time?" she asked, amusement lacing her words. Blake, taken aback, inquired, "How did you know I was going to ask you about that? Didn't Professor Dumbledore mention it before? If you're planning a lengthy journey, you're to take me with you. He wouldn't have it any other way," Nagini explained. Blake made a face, his lips curling slightly. "If I want to go out and explore, he can't stop me," he muttered under his breath before clearing his throat. "Ahem, all right, you guessed it. We're off to Sweden this time," he announced with a grin. The plan was simple, yet adventurous. Blake intended to release a newly bred scimitar-horned Snorkak in Sweden, only to recapture it there. Of course, he didn't actually need to travel to Sweden for this task, but the opportunity for an excursion was too tempting to pass up. Why confine himself to the grounds of Hogwarts when there could be Swedish Brachyrhinosauruses waiting for him? Armed with an ample supply of Master Balls, Blake was ready for this new adventure. Chapter 320, Nagini's Request and Luna's Enthusiasm. Nagini approached Beck with a request, her tone earnest. "Beck, I'm embarking on a lengthy journey with Blake tomorrow. I need you to oversee the canteen in my absence." Beck nodded eagerly, his loyalty evident. "You needn't ask twice, Miss Nagini. It's an honor for Beck to assist the masters." After Nagini handed him a box, Beck offered his help with the travel preparations. However, Nagini politely declined, insisting she could manage on her own. Beck, pleased by Nagini's polite request, hurried off to his duties. Nagini then turned to Blake, a hint of confusion in her voice. He just referred to us as masters. Blake simply shrugged, his response lighthearted. There's nothing amiss with that. We're all part of one big family, aren't we? Blake then mentioned his plans for the following day. First, I'll grab some breakfast. I'll meet you tomorrow, and then we'll head out together. Opting for a change, Blake didn't go for his usual dessert breakfast. Instead, he chose a small plate of cookies and complimented them with buns from the system warehouse, appreciating the house elves' culinary skills. To add to his meal, Blake brewed a cup of Gordig root tea, its slightly intoxicating aroma filling the air. As Blake enjoyed his spicy strips and tea, Luna Lovegood's voice broke the silence. Blake, is that Gordig root tea? The other students, now curious, learned the name of Blake's peculiar beverage. Yes, it is. Would you like some? Blake offered, conjuring a new cup on the table for Luna. She eagerly accepted, taking a sip and sighing contentedly. It's been a while since I've had Gordig root tea. I drink it every day at home. Luna then inquired how Blake came to possess the tea, quickly deducing that her father must have given it to him. Blake confirmed, mentioning a letter from Mr. Lovegood about his visit. Their conversation then shifted to Blake's upcoming trip to Sweden in search of the elusive Snorlax. Luna, unable to contain her excitement, asked if she could accompany him. Blake hesitated, citing the distance and her father's likely disapproval. However, Luna was adamant, confident her father would consent given her fascination with the Snorlax. She decided to write to her father immediately, seeking permission and a leave of absence from school. Blake watched Luna rush off, a smile on his face. He had hoped she would join him, knowing Mr. Lovegood would not refuse his daughter's request. For Blake, bringing Luna along was a strategic move to gain favor and maximize the benefits of their adventure. After breakfast, Blake sought Dumbledore's permission for their leave. Dumbledore, though skeptical of Blake's intentions, granted the request. He understood Blake's determination and preferred to give his consent rather than have Blake proceed without approval. This chapter sets the stage for an exciting journey, highlighting the characters' relationships and their adventurous spirits. Early the next morning, Blake was enjoying his breakfast in the dining hall, eagerly awaiting the arrival of his companions. Soon enough, Ginny arrived, patting her backpack, which had been enchanted with an invisible stretch charm, signaling that she was fully packed and ready to go. Blake greeted her with a basket of homemade xiaolongbao and a bowl of soy milk, which she accepted with a delighted expression. The delicately made, thin-skinned dumplings clearly suited Ginny's taste, as her eyes lit up with the first bite. Not long after, Luna joined them, carrying her own backpack. When should we set off? Should we use flu powder or perhaps ride on thestrals? She inquired. Blake responded with a smile, no rush, let's enjoy our breakfast first. He possessed the skill of dimensional gait, making long-distance travel effortless for him. However, upon seeing Luna, he found himself reconsidering their mode of travel. Perhaps they could take their time and enjoy the journey from the start. Instead of leading them to a secluded spot to use the dimensional gate, Blake guided Ginny and Luna into the Forbidden Forest. As they ventured deeper, surrounded by an increasing number of trees, Blake used his hockey to scan the area, ensuring they were alone. Ginny and Luna looked at him with curiosity, having expected him to teleport them directly. So, how should we start this trip? Luna asked, intrigued. Since we're not in a hurry, we shouldn't miss out on enjoying the scenery along the way, Blake replied. He then put his hand to his mouth and let out a sharp whistle. Moments later, the trees rustled, and several thestrals emerged from the forest, slowly approaching them. Luna watched in amazement, already imagining the beginning of their adventure. Would any of you be willing to give us a ride? Blake asked the thestrals, treating them with the same respect he would afford any person. To him, as a druid, these magical creatures were not so different from humans. The thestrals seemed to converse among themselves in a surprisingly human-like manner before one of them stepped forward. Thank you very much for your assistance, Blake said, his gratitude evident. The thestrals neighed in response, as if understanding his words. All but three then vanished back into the woods. Ginny was already aware of Blake's ability to communicate with animals, but for Luna, this was a revelation. Watching the exchange between Blake and the Thestrals, she found it utterly magical. "Blake, were you communicating with them just now?" Luna asked, her excitement palpable. Blake nodded. "Yes, I can communicate with magical creatures." "How do you do it?" she pressed. "Can you teach me?" "Well, this is actually a talent of mine. After awakening my magical abilities, I discovered this skill," Blake explained. "So, I'm sorry, Luna. Even if I wanted to, I couldn't teach you," he added, noting the disappointment in her eyes. Luna's expression fell slightly, but she quickly recovered, her curiosity and excitement about the journey ahead undiminished. Spirits soared as Blake offered to be a translator for future encounters with the bent-horn beasts, a proposal that Luna eagerly accepted. The anticipation built as each of them mounted a yeji, with Luna, in her excitement, generously offering a gold treasure chest to Blake. With a flick of his wand, Blake cast a spell on Luna and Nagini, promising them protection against the wind and cold during their flight. The magic enveloped them in warmth, dispelling the winter chill instantly. "All right, just hold on tight to the yeji," Blake instructed, his voice filled with excitement. "Let's fly!" With that, he spurred his yeji forward, and after a short sprint, the creature spread its wings and soared into the sky, followed closely by the ones carrying Nagini and Luna. As Hogwarts Castle shrank beneath them, Luna lay on the yeji's back, her expression a mix of tension and thrill. This was her first flight on a yeji, an experience that sent her emotions into a whirlwind of excitement. She looked up to Blake with admiration, grateful for the unique adventure he had provided. The idea of flying on a yeji was something she had never even considered, and now it felt like an exhilarating dream come true. The trio flew eastward, leaving England far behind as the day gradually turned to evening. Blake, noticing Luna's undiminished excitement and Nagini's dazed state, decided to land on a picturesque hillside to rest for the night. With agile movements, Blake dismounted and assisted a groggy Nagini off her yeji, while Luna, still brimming with energy, jumped down on her own. Concerned, Blake inquired about Nagini's condition, noting her unusual lethargy. Nagini, merging with her snake form, was typically in robust health, making her current state all the more puzzling. "I'm just a bit sleepy," Nagini confessed, attributing her drowsiness to the warmth the spell provided, which only intensified over time. Blake, puzzled, delved deeper, uncovering that Nagini felt a similar sleepiness when near a fireplace, leading to a revelation about her aversion to winter and her desire to hibernate, a trait from her snake form. Apologizing for his oversight, Blake reassured Nagini, promising that wizarding advancements could potentially restore her human form completely. His confidence and bright smile comforted Nagini, reminding her of the hope and trust she placed in him, despite her momentary sadness at her current state. In Blake's words, Nagini found solace, believing in the possibility of a complete transformation, a testament to the magic and friendship that bound them together on this extraordinary journey. Blake had become Nagini's most steadfast pillar of support. "Okay, you take a seat and rest for a bit. I'll get a tent set up," he said, taking Nagini's backpack with ease. Luna approached them, noticing Nagini's weary state. "I had my dad send me some Gordig root tea. It's very refreshing, and I thought it might help you," she said, producing a bag of the special tea leaves. "Thank you, Luna. That's very thoughtful of you," Nagini replied with a grateful smile. "You're welcome. Blake, do you need help setting up the tent? I can go look for water," Luna offered, reaching for her water bottle. "Look for water? We're wizards, Luna," Blake said with a chuckle. He took the kettle from her, pointed his wand at it, and whispered softly, "Agua menti." A stream of water flowed from his wand's tip, filling the kettle swiftly. Luna's eyes widened in surprise. "That's amazing, Blake." "It's actually a basic spell that any wizard can perform. It's not particularly impressive," Blake admitted, feeling a bit sheepish under her praise. He thought to himself that there was really nothing remarkable about the Aguamenti spell. "My dad is always buried in the Quibbler, and after my mom passed away, I never really learned any spells from him," Luna shared. "So, this is the first time I've seen this spell." Hearing this, Blake felt a wave of sympathy for Luna. Her mother had died while experimenting with a new spell, a tragedy Luna had witnessed as a child. Since then, she had been raised by her eccentric father, a man deeply engrossed in his work. Blake could only imagine how lonely Luna's childhood must have been. Despite attending Hogwarts and being surrounded by peers, she struggled to make friends, and some even teased her for her unique personality, like hiding her shoes. But Blake was determined to change that. "You should come to me more often. I can teach you any spell you want to learn," he offered warmly, hoping to ease some of her loneliness and encourage her in her magical education. Chapter 321. Luna. Why do you know everything? Okay, as long as you don't find me annoying. Luna expressed her excitement, marveling at Blake's capabilities for the first time. His strengths lay precisely in the areas that fascinated her the most. For instance, his ability to duel with magical creatures was something she found particularly intriguing. Although she regretted not being able to learn this skill herself, the fact that Blake had agreed to act as her translator was thrilling. The prospect of communicating directly with magical animals filled her with excitement. Moreover, Luna was astounded by the breadth of Blake's magical knowledge. She watched in awe as he set up a tent without once using his hands. He simply waved his wand, and the tent assembled itself as if by magic. Luna had observed closely enough to know that this was not a self-assembling tent. Yet, Blake had managed to erect it effortlessly, leaving Luna puzzled about the spell he had used. As Luna waited for the water to boil for tea, she couldn't help but wonder if Blake could have brewed the tea with a mere wave of his wand, had he not agreed to let her make it. Meanwhile, Blake was preoccupied with setting up their camp. After erecting the tent, he kindly declined Nagini's offer to help with dinner, suggesting she rest instead. "You're not as adept at cooking as I am," he said, directing her to one of the tent's several spacious rooms. The tent, far from being a mundane Muggle tent, was magically enlarged to contain multiple rooms. Blake then began to prepare for dinner outside, soon noticing Luna's admiring gaze. "Why are you looking at me like that?" he asked. "Blake, you are so considerate," Luna replied, sitting on a rock, her eyes shining with admiration as the kettle hissed softly in the background. Blake, puffing up his chest, responded with a smile. "Ahem, I always strive to be considerate. By the way, what would you like to eat? I pride myself on my culinary skills." Luna's curiosity was piqued. "Can you really make whatever I want?" "Of course," Blake boasted. "Then, I'll leave it up to you. I'll enjoy whatever you decide to make." Luna had initially wanted pudding, but she doubted the feasibility of making it in the wilderness. However, Blake seemed to know Luna better than she realized. He took out 4 eggs and placed them on the table. "I've heard you're quite fond of pudding, aren't you?" he asked. Luna looked at him in surprise. "How did you know? Wait, you didn't just happen to bring the ingredients, did you?" Blake spread his hands. "For certain reasons, I'm able to carry a lot with me." Indeed, his ability to transport numerous items wasn't solely due to the system warehouse. His levitating cloak, with its vast pockets and the ability to store even living creatures in a master ball within the system warehouse, allowed him to bring almost anything. "Just because I can carry so much, I can prepare any dish you name," Blake explained. "But what if you don't know how to make what I request?" Luna inquired, her curiosity unabated. Blake reached into his pocket and after a moment pulled out 5 or 6 thick books, placing them on the table, which groaned under their weight. "Actually, I always carry recipes with me." Luna, astonished, exclaimed, "You've read so many cookbooks." "Well, actually, these are all catalogs," Blake admitted casually, causing Luna to look at him in confusion. As Blake began to put away the catalogs, a system announcement indicated that he had reached the limit of treasure he could acquire for the day, which left him slightly regretful. "Ahem, I was just joking with you," Blake said, starting to unload items from the system warehouse. "You go make the tea first, and I'll start on the meal." This chapter showcases Blake's magical prowess and his thoughtful nature, especially towards Luna, whose curiosity and admiration for Blake's abilities are evident. Their interaction highlights the blend of magic and mundane life, creating a charming and engaging narrative. Blake promised Ed to prepare several puddings with different flavors soon. "By the way, could you ask Sister Nagini if she'd like anything to eat?" he added. Luna nodded in agreement. "Okay," she said, then opened the tent door and stepped inside. Blake watched her leave before dramatically pulling a large oven from his pocket. After a short while, Luna returned with Nagini's response, which was essentially indifferent, leaving Blake free to choose whatever he wished to prepare. In many cases, the word whatever could pose a challenge, but not for Blake. Under Luna's intrigued gaze, he began to work his magic, this time pulling out a casserole dish. While the food cooked, Blake took the opportunity to secure their campsite. With his wand at the ready, he cast a series of protective spells. Peaceful Guard, Muggle Repulsion. In total, he applied more than 10 protective enchantments. To any onlooker, the hillside would now be invisible. Upon returning to check on the food, Blake found Luna watching him with curiosity. With the wisdom of experience, he began to explain the purpose of the spells in detail, anticipating her questions. "These spells are essential for wizards traveling abroad," he explained. "By concealing our camp, we prevent muggles from witnessing magic, thus upholding the international statute of secrecy. Additionally, it safeguards us against potential threats from wild beasts, magical creatures, or even malevolent wizards. The world beyond Hogwarts is fraught with unknown dangers." He paused, leaving unsaid the fact that even Hogwarts wasn't entirely safe. If he hadn't preemptively dealt with the basilisk that year, the school would have faced dire consequences. Luna sighed, impressed. "You know so much. When will I ever learn as much as you?" Blake considered this for a moment before responding. "I'll share all I know with you, and then you'll be just as knowledgeable." "That makes sense." Luna's eyes sparkled with excitement. "Then I'll visit you more often from now on." She added, "Now I understand why everyone enjoys your company, and those who work with you always seem to excel academically." "Perhaps," Blake conceded, not denying the observation. Indeed, many who sought his company saw improvements in their studies, gaining more than just basic knowledge. Cassandra delved into alchemy, Hermione honed her potion-making skills, and even Hannah's proficiency in herbology saw significant improvement. Harry, too, learned the coveted enhanced disarming spell from Blake, albeit at a steep price. After enjoying some Gordig root tea together as the sky darkened, the sweet scent of baking soon filled the air. Blake asked Luna to invite Nagini to dinner, then proceeded to set up a dining table by the campfire. On a coffee table nearby, a pot containing a magical plant version of a sunflower emitted a warm, soft light, dispelling the cold and darkness and imbuing the campsite with a spring-like warmth. Amidst the desolate hillside, Luna and Nagini felt an unexpected sense of coziness. Blake then presented an array of dishes, with the puddings particularly standing out. "I've prepared several kinds of puddings," he announced, placing several plates on the table. Each plate showcased a large, distinctively flavored pudding. "Here we have matcha egg pudding, yellow peach no-bake pudding, caramel pudding." Blake listed off 5 or 6 varieties in total, confident they had enough to satisfy everyone. Additionally, Blake brought over a small casserole and placed it in front of Nagini, lifting the lid to reveal its contents. A burnt aroma wafted out. "This is eel casserole rice, featuring eel, rice, and some vegetables. It might look simple, but I believe you'll enjoy it," he said. Nagini leaned in, closed her eyes, and inhaled deeply. Upon opening her eyes, they sparkled with delight. "It smells wonderful. Blake, I love this," she exclaimed, her anticipation evident. Luna detected the scent of burning aroma, her senses sharpened by curiosity. Amidst the fragrances, a faint fishy smell lingered, causing her to pop, "Os." She wondered if Blake had perhaps overlooked cleaning the eel properly. Yet, considering Blake's culinary expertise, such an oversight seemed unlikely. Pushing the thought aside, Luna scooped a small amount of caramel pudding into her mouth, the sweetness overwhelming her senses. Turning her attention to Nagini, Luna noticed her companion savoring the eel casserole rice with evident delight, seemingly oblivious to any off-putting odor. Blake, observing the scene, couldn't hide his satisfaction as he watched the two enjoy the fruits of his labor, a sense of pride swelling within him. "Why don't you try the casserole rice?" Nagini inquired, puzzled by Blake's lack of interest in his own dish. "I was in the mood for some meat tonight," Blake responded nonchalantly, reaching for a plate to serve himself 2 steaks that were perfectly seared on the outside while remaining tender on the inside. Nagini, a meat lover herself, couldn't help but feel that, despite her preference, the casserole rice somehow tasted superior to the steaks on Blake's plate. The dinner table was a feast for the eyes, adorned with an array of dishes that rivaled the lavish spreads at Hogwarts. French stewed chicken, onion soup, and a variety of seasonal vegetable salads graced the table, making for a rich culinary experience. Throughout the meal, the trio engaged in lively conversation. Blake shared tales of his adventures in the Albanian forest and his encounters with the legendary Newt Scamander, captivating Luna's imagination. Despite reaching her limit on treasure discoveries for the day, Luna felt enriched by the conversation and the prospect of earning Blake's good opinion. Luna's excitement was palpable as she spoke of her admiration for Scamander's work and her hope to encounter the elusive scimitar-horned Snorlax. Blake, confident in his abilities, assured her of their success, his recent endeavors in Sweden having prepared him well for the task. However, when Luna expressed her desire to bring a Snorlax back to the UK, Blake emphasized the importance of respecting the creature's wishes, a sentiment Luna quickly agreed with. Despite Blake's modesty, his skills in druidic magic often ensured the cooperation of magical creatures, a fact he humbly downplayed. As the meal concluded, Nagini's satisfaction was evident, her appetite far surpassing that of an average person. Luna's curiosity resurfaced, questioning Nagini's inability to detect the fishy smell. Nagini's surprise at the question revealed a difference in perception, hinting at the unique tastes and experiences that shaped their enjoyment of the meal. Blake's clarification further illuminated the subjective nature of taste, a reminder of the diverse palates that gathered around the table. It was Tuesday, a detail that suddenly made sense to Blake as he prepared only his portion of the casserole rice. After all, the others couldn't stomach such a peculiar dish, given its fishy aroma. Really? Maybe my nose deceived me. Luna mused aloud after Blake echoed her initial observation. She began to doubt her senses, wondering if she had indeed misheard. Nagini, observing the exchange, felt a wave of gratitude towards Blake. She understood that he was protecting her secret, allowing her to live as though she were human. Blake caught Nagini's lowered gaze but couldn't decipher her thoughts. "Everything is going to be fine," he reassured her, his voice steady and confident. "Yeah," Nagini responded, her smile brightening. She recognized this as yet another promise from Blake, a vow that he would assist her in fully reverting to her human form. Unbeknownst to Blake, Nagini was already content. The thought of retaining some serpent habits no longer troubled her. What mattered was her current state of existence, indistinguishable from that of a human. This acceptance marked a significant shift in her perspective, embracing her unique journey with optimism. Chapter 322, Understanding My Brother's Happiness. After dinner, the trio returned to their tent. That night, Luna bombarded Blake with numerous spell requests, which he gladly fulfilled. Nagini, too, experimented with several new spells. Late into the night, they retired to their rooms for some well-deserved rest. The next morning, Blake emerged from the tent, stretching, to find Nagini had already prepared breakfast. Luna was nearby, tenderly feeding pieces of meat to the three Thestrals. "Luna, perhaps we should consider a different mode of travel today," Blake suggested, having learned from the system that the treasure chest drops for Luna and Nagini had been reset. "Are we not riding the Thestrals today?" Luna inquired, puzzled. Blake explained with a smile. "The journey from England to Sweden spans at least 1,000 kilometers. Continuously riding the Thestrals would exhaust them. They, too, are living beings and cannot endure endless labor like machines. Even machines suffer from fatigue. Yesterday's flight alone was akin to running a marathon for them. They can't possibly recover overnight." Luna nodded, her understanding dawning. She then turned her attention back to the Thestrals, apologizing for her oversight. "I'm sorry, I never considered how hard this has been on you." After ensuring the Thestrals were well fed, the trio sat down for breakfast. Luna, curious about their new travel plans, asked, "What will we do with the Thestrals if we're changing our mode of travel?" Blake reassured her, "They'll find their way home. Don't worry, they know the path." Relieved by Blake's words, Nagini then asked, "So, how do we set off today?" Blake, preferring not to rely on the dimensional portal for direct teleportation, proposed a choice. "Would you prefer comfort or excitement?" Luna and Nagini exchanged glances before answering in unison. "More exciting." Blake chuckled. "It seems we all belong in Gryffindor. Let's finish breakfast, and then I'll reveal our thrilling travel plans. Luna, undisturbed by the suspense, eagerly anticipated the adventure. Why worry? We'll find out soon enough, she said, taking a bite of her baked potato. Blake admired her attitude, then discreetly opened a small dimensional door behind him, tossing a master ball through it before the portal vanished as if it had never been there. After breakfast, Blake quickly packed up, removing all protective and warning spells from the area. Once Nagini had packed everything into her backpack, Luna looked at Blake expectantly. Blake, amused by her eagerness, said, "Give me a moment to send the Thestrals back first." Approaching the Thestrals, Blake whispered to them before feeding each a fist-sized pill. Initially sluggish, the creatures perked up almost immediately after swallowing the pills. "What did you give them?" Luna asked, her curiosity piqued. "Some nutritional pills made from potion ingredients. It's not ideal for Thestrals to consume liquid potions directly, so pills are a better option," Blake explained, showcasing his thoughtfulness and versatility. Luna nodded, her admiration for Blake growing. She realized that his care for their well-being extended beyond just their immediate needs, reflecting a deeper understanding and respect for all creatures. Blake's confidence in finding the elusive, bent-horned Snorlax was unwavering. Luna, ever the optimist, believed that the journey itself was a reward, regardless of the outcome. As they prepared for the next phase of their adventure, both Nagini and Luna cast curious glances at Blake, wondering how he planned to proceed. Surrounded by the attentive eyes of his companions, Blake wasted no time. He placed a finger to his lips and let out a melodious whistle. Moments later, a distant roar echoed through the air, prompting him to suggest they step back to make room for what was to come. Though Nagini and Luna were puzzled by Blake's request for space, they complied, retreating several steps. As they settled into their new positions, Luna's eyes widened in astonishment at the sight of a massive black cloud approaching from the horizon. As it drew nearer, the cloud revealed itself to be a gigantic black dragon, its form unlike any she had seen before. "Fire! Fire dragon!" Luna gasped, her first instinct to flee. Yet the sight of Blake's calm, slightly smiling face halted her. It dawned on her that this fearsome creature had been summoned by Blake himself. As the dragon landed gracefully before them, its immense yellow-brown eyes inspecting the trio, a series of notifications rang out, rewarding Blake with treasure chests for the shock and awe his summoning had induced. Despite knowing the dragon meant them no harm, Luna couldn't help but feel a tremor of fear. Blake approached the dragon, affectionately patting its head. "Dahe, you've done well today," he praised. The dragon, Dahe, responded with a nod before lying down, allowing them to climb onto its back. Nagini was familiar with Dahe, but for Luna this was a first. Never before had she been so close to a creature as majestic as a fire dragon, let alone one as colossal as Dahe, whose size dwarfed that of an ordinary dragon. Dahe was not just any dragon, it had been a formidable contender in the Colosseum, captured for experimental purposes. Blake led the way, using Dahe's bone spurs as footholds to climb onto its back. Luna followed, her hands brushing against the dragon's hot, hard scales. Encouraged by Blake, she climbed up without hesitation. Once Luna was seated in front of Blake, Nagini took her place behind him. Positioned snugly between two massive bone spurs, the trio was ready for takeoff. "Dahe, take off!" Blake commanded. With a powerful leap, Dahe launched from the hillside, sending a thrilling jolt of weightlessness through them. Luna clung to the bone spur in front of her as the dragon ascended, its wings beating powerfully. Her fear turned to exhilaration, and she couldn't help but cheer as they soared into the clouds. Blake, focused on their safety, cast protective spells to shield them from the fierce winds. Despite the challenges, he was content, surrounded by the comforting presence of his companions. The adventure ahead promised to be unforgettable, with the mighty Dahe leading their way through the skies. Cradling the source of the sweet, intoxicating fragrance in my arms, I couldn't help but feel a wave of contentment wash over me. However, the sudden jolt from my mode of transportation quickly snapped me back to reality. Ahem. Dahe, could you please fly a bit more steadily? There's no need to rush, I gently chided, trying to maintain my composure despite the exhilaration bubbling within me. After all, you might not fully grasp the extent of my current joy. In response, Dahe let out a snort, accompanied by a small puff of fire, as if to express his indifference or perhaps his own form of agreement. The warmth from the fire contrasted sharply with the cool air at this altitude, adding another layer to the complex tapestry of sensations I was experiencing at that moment. Chapter 323. You Already Have a Way to Die. With a sharp snap, a copy of the Quibbler was flung onto the floor. Garbage. Absolute garbage. Lockhart raged within the confines of his office. Why on earth would Blake suggest I publish in such a trashy magazine? His frustration was palpable. Just 2 days prior, Blake had assured him that the Quibbler would offer a valuable platform for his career. Trusting in Blake's seemingly magical knack for success, Lockhart had felt a wave of relief wash over him. However, driven by curiosity, he decided to peruse the magazine he had never before considered. To his dismay, after reading merely 2 articles, his expression soured. He could have forgiven the magazine's lack of reputation or its status as a newcomer. But the content? Articles filled with baseless speculation and subjective ramblings. Curved horned Snorlax? Harassing fly? What sort of nonsense is this? And then there was the article claiming Fudge is secretly training an army of house elves. Such ludicrous content being published was beyond belief. To Lockhart, it was clear the Quibbler was nothing more than a third-rate publication, relying on sensational and bizarre headlines to draw attention. He could hardly believe that relying on such a platform could ever help him challenge the Daily Prophet. The very idea seemed laughable. Could it be? Could Blake have been playing me for a fool? The thought sent Lockhart into a panic. As a former Hogwarts top student and a best-selling author, he was no stranger to success. Something felt amiss. Frantically, he searched through his belongings until he found a wrinkled copy of the Daily Prophet, the same one that had infuriated him days before. At the time, he had barely glanced at it before crumpling it in disgust. Now, with a calmer demeanor, he examined it thoroughly, not sparing even the illustrations. One illustration in particular caught his eye, a middle-aged wizard with his face obscured. At first glance, Lockhart had assumed it was a sneaky photo of his colleague Snape, taken by Rita Skeeter to lend credibility to her story. But upon closer inspection, Lockhart realized the man in the photo bore a striking yet familiar resemblance to someone else, definitely not Snape. After a few moments, the realization hit him like a ton of bricks. The Daily Prophet article mentioned an unnamed victim, Ackerman Allen. Lockhart's heart sank. Ackerman Allen, not a victim of some scandal, but of his own memory charm. The very same charm Lockhart had used to steal Allen's achievements and claim them as his own in his book Walking with Ghouls. The implications were chilling. If Ackerman had been found, did that mean his misdeeds were coming to light? Lockhart's mind raced with paranoia. I will not let everything I've worked for slip through my fingers, he vowed, his eyes burning with determination. But how had Rita Skeeter found Ackerman? Did she know the truth of Lockhart's actions, or was it mere coincidence? And if she knew, who could have informed her? Suddenly, Blake's image flashed in his mind. Blake had hinted at knowing Lockhart's secrets long before. Could he have been the one to tell Rita? Yet, what would Blake gain from exposing him? Lockhart found it hard to discern whether Blake's warnings were genuine threats or mere bluffs. After all, Blake had never divulged any specifics. The most perplexing question remained: if Blake truly intended to act against him, why involve the Quibbler? Lockhart's thoughts were a whirlwind of fear, suspicion, and unresolved questions. One thing was clear: he was caught in a web of his own making, and finding a way out would require all the cunning and guile he possessed. Lockhart was perplexed. To him, targeting the Quibbler seemed excessive. If Blake was behind it, wouldn't it have been wiser to simply observe as the Daily Prophet gradually cornered him? The situation was baffling. Meanwhile, Blake, with the control over a formidable black dragon, soared through the skies. The dragon's speed and endurance were unmatched, making their day-long flight a remarkable journey. As night approached, Blake suggested, "Let's find a place to rest." Nagini and Luna, who had been accompanying him, agreed. Despite having only bread for sustenance throughout their flight, the experience of traveling on a dragon was unforgettable. Using his keen perception, Blake spotted a secluded mountaintop for their campsite. He preferred the mountaintop for its expansive views and the sense of security it provided. As they landed, Blake assisted Luna in dismounting first. To her surprise, Nagini was already on the ground, showcasing agility that was beyond ordinary. Blake, too, descended gracefully from the dragon, landing without a scratch despite the height, a testament to his extraordinary abilities. After sending the dragon away, as it would require more food than they had brought, the trio set about making camp. Nagini and Luna worked on the tent, while Blake prepared a fire and cast protective spells. Soon, a cozy bonfire lit up the darkness, and Luna skillfully boiled water, now proficient in the spell for conjuring clear water. The campsite, illuminated by several pots of sunflowers, felt as bright as day. Luna, basking in the warmth of the camp, expressed her delight. "What I've experienced today surpasses anything I've lived through before. I never imagined I'd embark on such a fantastic journey on a fire dragon." Blake, preparing dinner, responded with a smile. "Believe me, if you wish, you can live this kind of life often in the future." He foresaw Luna's potential to become a magizoologist, traveling the world to study magical creatures, much like Newt Scamander. Luna, inspired by the thought, asked Blake if he would join her in her travels. Surprised by her question, Blake revealed his own dream of becoming an adventurer, eager to witness the world's wonders and unravel its mysteries. "So," he concluded, "there are many adventures ahead of us. There's a high likelihood we'll become travel companions in the future," Blake said, his words sparking a vivid image in Luna's mind of the adventures that lay ahead. The thought of traversing the globe, uncovering its hidden mysteries alongside Blake, filled her with excitement. "I'd love to explore the world's mysteries with you." Luna responded, her voice brimming with enthusiasm. "Really? Then it's a deal," Blake replied, sealing their future endeavors with a nod. Luna's gaze then shifted to Nagini, who had been quietly observing the exchange. "Sister Nagini, what about you? What are your plans?" she inquired. Nagini gestured towards Blake, her actions speaking louder than words. "Wherever he goes, I'll follow," she conveyed, her loyalty to Blake evident. Luna was taken aback by Nagini's response, sensing a deep bond between her and Blake, a story yet untold. Her curiosity piqued. Luna was about to delve deeper when a sudden rustle from the mountain's base caught their attention. Blake, Nagini, and Luna all heard it. Blake calmly set aside the meat cleaver, wiped his hands with a cloth, and fixed his gaze on the woods behind their tent. "Who could that be?" Luna whispered, a hint of unease in her voice. "There's no need for whispers, Luna. I've cast a protective spell around our camp. Outsiders can neither see nor hear us," Blake reassured her, removing his apron and clutching his wand as he approached the camp's edge to peer into the woods. Soon, the sound of barking dogs and distant conversation reached their ears. "Are you sure this is the place?" "Absolutely. I saw a black dragon land here with my own eyes." The voices discussed the dragon, their intent clear. They were poachers, looking to capture it for their Colosseum, a place evidently lacking in new products. Blake's expression turned cold upon overhearing their conversation. To most, these men were merely lawbreakers to be apprehended and imprisoned, but to Blake, an archdruid, their fate was sealed the moment their intentions became clear. Sensing Blake's murderous intent, Nagini stepped forward, ready to stand by him. The poachers, torches in hand, illuminated the mountaintop, their confusion palpable as they found no trace of the dragon. "Impossible! Where are the footprints?" they exclaimed, unaware that the dragon's landing site was right within Blake's magically concealed camp. As the poachers neared the edge of the invisible barrier, Luna watched apprehensively. Despite their inability to see Blake, Nagini, and herself, the threat they posed was clear. Yet, under Blake's protective spell, they remained unseen, a mere step away from confrontation. I couldn't see the camp, but the sensation of breathlessness overwhelmed me, my heart pounding violently in my chest. At that moment, the wizard with the pimpled face seemed inclined to venture closer to the wasteland for a better look. After all, it was perplexing how such a massive dragon could leave no trace behind. However, just as he was about to step into the camp, he halted abruptly. A sudden realization washed over him that there was nothing of interest to see there. With that, he turned away, directing his search elsewhere. This was, of course, the effect of Blake's peacekeeping charm and banishing charm. These protective spells were designed to instill in intruders the belief that the area held nothing of value. Consequently, they would lose any desire to approach the place again. Seeing Luna's anxious expression, Blake turned around and offered her a confident smile. However, he was taken aback by Luna's gaze, filled with shock, as he took a step out of the camp. Blake's use of magic had cleverly shielded their location, creating an invisible barrier that deterred unwanted visitors. The peacekeeping charm and banishing charm worked in tandem to manipulate the perceptions of those who neared, convincing them that their search would be fruitless and encouraging them to look elsewhere. This ingenious application of magic ensured their safety and kept their hideout undisturbed. Luna, who had been visibly tense, couldn't hide her astonishment at Blake's adept handling of the situation. Her shocked expression spoke volumes of her admiration and surprise at his ability to seamlessly blend magic and strategy. Blake, realizing the impact of his actions, couldn't help but feel a sense of pride in his resourcefulness. Together, they stood at the edge of their concealed sanctuary, protected by spells and the cleverness of their own making. Chapter 324, A Bold Step Forward. Luna was taken aback when Blake boldly stepped out of their protective camp, directly into the view of the menacing wizards lurking outside. She knew these individuals were up to no good, and Blake's sudden appearance had startled her. The protective magic they had set up was a temporary safe haven, but it wasn't invincible. Blake had explained before that once someone leaves the protective barrier, they can't be concealed by it again upon re-entry. This knowledge made Luna's heart race as she watched Blake venture out, leaving the safety of their magical shield. Nagini, on the other hand, chose to stay within the bounds of the protective magic, but moved closer to the edge, ready to strike if necessary. She was well aware of the element of surprise and its advantages in a confrontation. Turning to Luna, Nagini gestured for her to take cover in the tent, knowing well that if a battle ensued, spells would be flying in all directions. Most protective spells were designed to conceal, not to act as a shield against incoming magic. Reluctantly, Luna hid behind the tent, but couldn't resist peeking out to witness the unfolding events. To her surprise, not only was she shocked by Blake's audacity, but the poachers searching the area were equally taken aback. To them, Blake had seemingly materialized out of nowhere, a mere child confronting them. The leader of the poachers, a man with a pimpled face, was initially startled, but quickly became furious upon realizing he was being confronted by a young boy, feeling his authority challenged in front of his comrades. "Who are you? What are you doing here?" he demanded, trying to intimidate Blake with his anger. Blake, unfazed, responded calmly with his hands behind his back. "Does this mountain belong to you?" Caught off guard, the pimple-faced man shook his head. "Then you rented this mountain?" Blake continued, his tone steady and unyielding. Again, the man shook his head, unable to grasp Blake's calm demeanor. "So, who I am and what I'm doing here is none of your business, is it?" Blake retorted, his confidence irking the pimple-faced man further. Enraged by Blake's defiance, the man shouted, "You insolent brat! Answer my questions!" Blake remained composed. "Firstly, what I do is none of your business. Secondly, you're quite unpleasant to look at. Could you please keep your distance?" This comment pushed the pimple-faced man over the edge, his remaining patience obliterated by anger. "You're asking for it, kid," he yelled, lunging at Blake, intent on grabbing him. However, Blake was prepared. The hand that had been hidden behind his back, holding his wand, moved swiftly. "Hey, are you trying to draw your wand now? It's too late," Blake taunted, ready to defend himself. The confrontation had escalated quickly, but Blake stood his ground, ready to face whatever came next. His courage and quick thinking were about to be tested as the situation intensified. Blake was merely half a meter away from the pimple-faced aggressor, a distance too short for any conventional spellcasting. The tension was palpable, with Luna on the verge of screaming and Nagini observing with an unsettling calmness, her confidence in Blake unwavering. What unfolded next left everyone in disbelief. Instead of attempting to point his wand directly at his adversary, Blake grasped it with both hands and swung it upward as if it were a baseball bat. To the astonishment of the pimple-faced man, the wand transformed before his eyes, elongating and thickening from a slender stick into a formidable weapon. The transformation was so sudden that the pimple-faced man had no time to react before the wand, now a hefty stick, made a brutal connection with his chin. The impact was devastating. The pimple-faced man was sent flying, blood and teeth scattering in his wake, before he crashed to the ground, unconscious. His followers, momentarily stunned by the swift defeat of their leader, quickly recovered and charged at Blake with renewed fury. Blake, undeterred, manipulated his wand, then once more, causing it to extend into a long stick. With a powerful slam onto the ground, he unleashed an enhanced version of the Lumos spell, emitting a blinding light that incapacitated his attackers without affecting Luna or Nagini, who were shielded behind him. In the chaos that followed, Blake wielded his enlarged wand like a club, swiftly knocking down his opponents with a series of resounding blows. Within seconds, both men and dogs lay defeated at his feet. Luna, emerging from her hiding spot, witnessed Blake delivering a final blow to an unfortunate soul attempting to rise, ensuring his swift return to unconsciousness. As Blake reverted his wand back to its original size, Luna's perception of the polite and easygoing senior was irrevocably changed. She now saw him as a formidable force, capable of dispatching foes with nothing more than a stick. This revelation explained Nagini's earlier calmness, as she had always known the extent of Blake's capabilities. The sound of the system announcing a golden treasure chest, a reward for the shock Luna experienced, brought a satisfied smile to Blake's face. He pocketed his wand, turning to Luna with a grin that spoke volumes of his confidence and prowess. "When I go out," he began, his demeanor shifting from that of a fierce warrior back to the approachable senior, "I always make sure to be prepared for any situation." His transformation from a gentle figure to a warrior and back again left a lasting impression on Luna, forever altering her understanding of strength and protection. Safety is uncertain, so it makes sense for me to carry a magic wand that can enlarge and shrink my body, right? Luna nodded, albeit somewhat dazedly. After all, Blake had used that very wand to save everyone from danger before. It seemed both reasonable and necessary to her. Noticing Luna's agreement, Blake reached into his pocket, but in doing so, he accidentally dropped a pot containing a strange plant. He chuckled awkwardly as he picked it up again. "Is that a pot of devil's snare?" Luna asked, her tone laced with uncertainty. "Well?" Blake hesitated, realizing he had no choice but to admit it. "You remember I mentioned last night that my dream is to become an adventurer, right?" Luna nodded in response. "So, as a future adventurer who plans to travel the world, carrying a pot of devil's snare for protection while camping seems reasonable, doesn't it?" Luna glanced at Nagini, who appeared entirely unfazed by the conversation. "Should I consider that reasonable?" she asked. Without hesitation, Nagini nodded. "Absolutely reasonable." Seeing Nagini's confident demeanor, Luna began to doubt her own judgment. After all, cultivating such a dangerous plant would typically require numerous approvals from the Ministry of Magic. Blake's casual possession of it suggested he must have secured the necessary permissions. She rationalized that if the Ministry hadn't approved of people riding fire dragons, then Blake's actions must be within the bounds of legality. "I think it's very reasonable," Luna declared, now fully convinced. She soon discovered Blake's intentions for the devil's snare. He placed the pot on the ground, and the plant began to grow rapidly, soon towering over the nearby trees. Luna instinctively stepped back, observing the plant's many tentacles with a mix of awe and apprehension. Without warning, the devil's snare's tentacles ensnared everyone on the ground, wrapping them up like rice dumplings before hoisting them into the air. Blake, wand in hand, prepared to awaken his captives. It was clear he intended to use them to extract information about the Colosseum in Albania, a place that had taught him much. However, with Luna present, Blake decided against employing any harsh interrogation methods. He considered using legilimency, but first, he needed to awaken his captives. "Wake up," Blake murmured, wielding his wand, which emitted a soft blue light. The captives, including the poachers and their dogs, slowly regained consciousness. The poachers, particularly named Liao Leon, looked around in confusion before their gaze settled on Blake and the others. Blake noticed Liao Leon's difficulty in speaking, a result of having all his teeth knocked out earlier. Deciding against further conversation, Blake opted for legilimency. Approaching a man with a pimpled face, he locked eyes with him and whispered, "Legilimency." Moments later, Blake withdrew, having obtained the information he needed. He turned to Nagini and Luna, announcing, "We can't camp here tonight. Is it because of them?" Luna inquired, curious about the sudden change of plans. "Yes and no," Blake replied. "I'll take you to another location. Then, I'll return to deal with them. After that's settled, we can discuss our next steps." As they prepared to continue their journey, Luna voiced a concern. "If we leave them tied up here, what will happen if they manage to escape?" Blake responded with unwavering confidence. "A wizard without a wand, ensnared in my devil's snare, has only one fate, to quietly await death." He explained that while an ordinary devil's snare might succumb to wandless magic, his were different, mutated to resist fire to an extraordinary degree. Furthermore, escaping through apparition without a wand was a formidable challenge, and even if they managed it, Blake had memorized their faces. He could easily track them down using a dimensional gate. As Blake and Nagini packed up the camp, the captured wizards began to shout threats and pleas for release. "Let us go! You have no idea who you've offended," one screamed. "Release us now, or you'll regret it," threatened another. With a casual wave of his hand, Blake silenced them. The devil's snare extended tentacles to gag the wizards and cover their eyes, leaving only their noses free for breathing. The area was enveloped in silence. Once everything was packed, Nagini and Luna waited for Blake. Luna watched him, half expecting him to summon another dragon or perform some other impressive feat. However, Blake opted for a different approach this time. He traced a circle in the air with his hand, and a dimensional gate materialized before them. Luna gazed in awe at the shimmering portal and the starkly different landscape visible on the other side. "So, we can reach our destination in just a moment?" Luna asked, her voice tinged with surprise. "Exactly," Blake confirmed. "But tell me, do you prefer to bypass the journey entirely and arrive instantly, or do you enjoy the experience of traveling?" Luna paused, then smiled warmly. "I definitely prefer to savor the journey." Blake returned the smile and gestured invitingly towards the gate. "Let's go ahead. I'll join you shortly, and then we can continue to enjoy our adventure." After sending Nagini and Luna through the gate, Blake pondered his next move. He then opened a smaller dimensional door and called through it. "Mr. Scamander, are you home? Mr. Scamander, are you interested in magical creatures?" This adjustment not only corrects grammatical and punctuation errors, but also enhances the narrative's flow and clarity. Descriptive details have been refined to provide a clearer picture of the events, and the dialogue and actions of the characters have been made more consistent and logical. Chapter 325, Mr. Scamander, would you like to be the director of a magical zoo? When Newt Scamander stepped through the dimensional gate and saw the people and animals ensnared in the devil's snare, he was still in his pajamas. Just moments before, he had been lying in bed, preparing to read the newspaper before drifting off to sleep. "What's happening here?" he asked, bewildered. "And why have you ventured outside the school again?" With a flick of his wand, Newt's pajamas transformed into thick, warm wizarding robes. Blake invited Newt to join him by the campfire that was still glowing warmly from earlier. He then proceeded to explain the situation to Newt. After listening to Blake's account, Newt pinched the bridge of his nose, a look of fatigue crossing his face. Poachers again, and the Colosseum, no less. Blake felt a twinge of embarrassment seeing Newt like this. After all, Newt was no longer young, and his stamina wasn't what it used to be. "Mr. Scamander, didn't you take the life-extending potion I gave you?" Blake inquired, concerned. "Oh, I did. It works wonders," Newt replied with a smile. "Then why do you seem so exhausted?" Blake couldn't help but notice that Newt appeared more worn out than someone who had consumed a life-extending potion should. "Professor Dumbledore is brimming with energy every day since he took it." Newt chuckled and explained, "That's because Dumbledore doesn't have the daily responsibility of caring for a multitude of magical creatures." Blake then remembered the sheer number of magical animals Newt had to tend to every day. The secluded island Dumbledore had discovered was now home to many magical creatures awaiting release into the wild, a task that fell to Newt and his wife. Without the aid of magic, managing such a monumental task would be virtually impossible. Thus, Even with the life-extending potion, Newt couldn't help but feel overwhelmed by fatigue. "I was thoughtless," Blake admitted, feeling apologetic. "It's all right. This is the life I've chosen," Newt reassured him. "Actually, I owe you my thanks. If it weren't for you, Tina would have insisted I stop working with magical creatures altogether. She's always suggesting I retire." Blake responded earnestly. "While I understand your sentiment, continuing like this isn't sustainable in the long run. You need to consider your health as well as Mrs. Scamander's." Pausing for a moment, Blake then asked, "By the way, were the galleons we captured last time sufficient?" "There's more than enough," Newt confirmed. "That's a considerable sum, isn't it?" Blake mused. "All the creatures that could be safely released have been returned to their natural habitats, correct?" "Yes, only those that cannot be released for specific reasons, either due to environmental degradation or because they pose too much danger, remain in our care," Newt clarified. Blake pondered for a moment before speaking. "This situation isn't sustainable, Mr. Scamander. Not only is it financially draining, but it's also not a long-term solution for you. Eventually, you might find yourself merely trading the materials from these magical creatures for gold galleons to buy food for them." Newt looked at Blake, noticing the spark of an idea in his eyes. "You seem to have a plan in mind. So, what's your solution?" "How about we open a magical zoo?" Blake proposed enthusiastically. "A zoo," Newt echoed, surprised by the suggestion. "You mean a zoo for magical creatures, similar to a Muggle zoo?" To be honest, Newt was skeptical about the idea of a zoo. However, Blake was undeterred. "Exactly," Blake nodded. "While it's true that the quality of Muggle zoos varies, there are some that excel at their mission. They not only protect endangered species, but also open their doors to the public, allowing people to see and even interact with animals up close. This approach serves a dual purpose. It gives people the opportunity to witness rare and wild creatures, and it promotes the importance of conservation. Endangered animals," Blake continued, his voice filled with enthusiasm. "Moreover, the revenue from ticket sales and other sources can be allocated for the welfare of these animals. If we take inspiration from Muggle establishments, we can ensure the safety of both magical creatures and visitors alike. The concept of a zoo could be quite beneficial. This way, the funds allocated for the care of these remarkable creatures would be put to good use. Additionally, this initiative could significantly promote the protection of magical animals. The most crucial aspect is that by establishing a zoo, we can invite numerous enthusiasts of magical creatures to join our cause. Sharing the workload would undoubtedly lighten your burden." Blake paused for a moment before adding, "Imagine being a relaxed zoo director." As Newt listened to Blake's persuasive words, he felt a stir of excitement within him. The prospect of being close to magical animals without the need to traverse the globe was enticing. Moreover, the assistance with daily feeding and care tasks meant he would only need to oversee the operations. For a moment, Newt was lost in the excitement of the idea. But many of these magical creatures are highly dangerous and destructive. "I doubt the Ministry of Magic would approve," Newt voiced his concerns, his excitement giving way to apprehension. "If something were to go awry." Blake responded confidently, "Regarding the Ministry of Magic, why not consult with Professor Dumbledore? I'm certain he could find a solution." "As for the dangerous creatures," Blake continued, spreading his hands in a reassuring gesture, "if I managed to tame them, wouldn't that resolve the issue?" Newt looked at Blake, astonished. "Your logic is undeniable. It seems you found a solution to every problem. How will we know unless we try?" Blake sighed, his tone turning serious. "If our predecessors had succumbed to fear in the face of adversity, we wouldn't enjoy the peace and stability we have today." Convinced by Blake's argument, Newt nodded. "I'll speak with Dumbledore." His gaze then shifted to the unfortunate individuals ensnared in the Devil's Snare, shivering from the cold. "What about them?" he asked. Blake glanced at the poachers with disdain. "These individuals have harmed not only magical creatures, but also many innocent people. So..." Before Blake could finish, Newt gently grasped his wand arm, lowering it. "Let's take them to Azkaban," Newt suggested. He felt no sympathy for the poachers, but wished to spare Blake from further sullying his hands. Unbeknownst to Newt, Blake's hands were far from clean. Blake didn't protest. Sending them to Azkaban, letting the Dementors feast on them, might be a fate worse than death, he mused. Preparing to create a dimensional portal, Blake asked, should I go directly to Aurora Moody, or should we visit Professor Dumbledore first? Let's seek out Albus, Newt decided. Approaching Moody in your current state, do you really think you'd avoid being hit by a barrage of curses before you could even open your door? Chapter 326, A Partnership in Chaos. Blake flashed a mischievous grin. It seems I'm left with only one option. Truth be told, even if he had genuinely intended to seek out Moody, fear wouldn't have been part of the equation. After all, even if Blake stood motionless, Moody's spells might struggle to penetrate Blake's protective enchantments. The only exception would be if Moody, in a fit of paranoia, resorted to casting the killing curse indiscriminately. But when in doubt, the wisest course of action always led to Dumbledore. After all, who else but the de facto leader of the wizarding world could one turn to? Ahem! Blake cleared his throat, a hint of awkwardness in the air. With a flick of his wand, a small dimensional door materialized. Is anyone home? He called out, half expecting silence. To his astonishment, the door revealed Dumbledore, his expression laden with significance. Well, you've managed to open the door quite precisely this time, Dumbledore observed with a twinkle in his eye. Fortunately, I wasn't in the middle of anything delicate, Blake replied, the corners of his mouth twitching into a sheepish smile, hoping to diffuse the slight embarrassment of the moment. What brings you here this time? Dumbledore inquired, his curiosity piqued. Let's make this door a bit wider, shall we? It's rather chilly on your side, Blake suggested, expanding the dimensional portal. Stepping through, they found themselves in the cozy confines of the headmaster's office at Hogwarts, blissfully ignoring the unfortunate souls ensnared in a devil's snare on their way in. Dumbledore's gaze shifted to Newt, a hint of realization dawning. This has to do with magical creatures again, doesn't it? Spot on, Professor. But then again, who else but the headmaster would have such insight? Blake quipped, a playful smirk on his face. Dumbledore couldn't help but feel a surge of pride at the compliment, even if he wasn't one to seek flattery like Fudge. Blake and Newt then shared their recent adventures and Newt's vision of establishing a zoo for magical creatures. After a moment of contemplation, Dumbledore nodded. The idea has merit. Placing the zoo on that island would certainly make containment of the creatures more manageable. As long as we can guarantee the safety of our visitors, I see no reason why it shouldn't be feasible. Both Newt and Blake's faces lit up with joy. The prospect of a zoo not only provided a sanctuary for the magical creatures Blake had amassed, but also offered a unique solution for his experimental creations. It was a win-win. The zoo would serve as both a conservation effort and a source of materials for Blake's research, without the burden of personal upkeep. There won't be any issues with security, Professor, Blake assured confidently. With my abilities, any magical creature under my care will be as docile as a house cat. Newt nodded in agreement, his eyes reflecting a mix of exhaustion and satisfaction. Even creatures as formidable as the Chimera had succumbed to Blake's unique methods of taming. I'll discuss this with Fudge tomorrow, Dumbledore declared, his smile broadening. He couldn't help but notice Newt's weary demeanor, a testament to his tireless dedication. Despite having consumed a life-extending potion, the toll of his daily endeavors was evident. That's wonderful, Newt exclaimed, his spirits lifted by the prospect. I'll take charge of recruiting staff for the zoo. I have numerous contacts within the magizoologist community, Blake added, eager to contribute to the project's success. As they discussed the future of their ambitious venture, it was clear that their partnership, though unconventional, held the promise of revolutionizing the wizarding world's approach to magical creature conservation. Newt looked at Dumbledore in surprise. Are all zoo employees on the lookout for magizoologists? This is such a noble cause. Indeed, magizoologists were not typically short on funds. The value of fantastic beasts was considerable, and if Newt were to recruit under the guise of studying magical creatures, it was likely that many would eagerly join the cause. Moreover, the prospect of protecting magical animals from poachers served as a noble and appealing mission, potentially attracting volunteers willing to work for minimal compensation or even pay for the opportunity to contribute. After discussing the zoo, Blake redirected the conversation to the recent encounter with a poacher. "Let's go have a look," Dumbledore suggested. Blake promptly opened a dimensional door to the location of their recent confrontation. "Wait a moment," Dumbledore interjected, returning to his desk to pen a letter. He handed it to Fawkes, who was napping behind him, instructing, "Give this to Alastor." Fawkes, albeit reluctantly, took the letter. Delivering messages to Moody always meant dodging a spell first, given the man's notorious paranoia. Even for a phoenix, this task was sometimes daunting. Once Fawkes had departed, Dumbledore stepped through the dimensional gate to the hilltop, where Blake had apprehended the poachers. The culprits, ensnared in a devil's snare, were a mix of angry, despairing, and defiant, having been caught red-handed. Among them, Pimpleface was particularly incensed. He had been outsmarted and subdued by a mere child, and now, stripped of his dignity and his teeth, he hung trapped and humiliated. In his fury, Pimpleface plotted his revenge, believing he could still wield powerful magic without his wand, if only he could free his mouth from the devil's snare. His opportunity seemed to arise when he heard footsteps approaching once more, this time accompanied by another voice. "I will never surrender," Pimpleface thought bitterly, just as the snare around his eyes was removed. He glared defiantly in the direction of the newcomers, determined to show his unbroken spirit even in captivity. To his shock, standing beside the young boy who had defeated him was none other than Albus Dumbledore. The realization that Dumbledore was present extinguished any hope of resistance Pimpleface might have harbored. Even if he were free and armed, the wise choice upon encountering Dumbledore would be to flee, a luxury he no longer possessed. "That's him! He hit me!" Pimpleface heard the boy accuse. The injustice of the accusation stung. It was he who had been attacked, his teeth knocked out by the boy's stick, and yet here was the boy, shamelessly playing the victim to Dumbledore. Pimpleface wanted to protest, to defend his honor, but the devil's snare kept his mouth firmly sealed. Dumbledore, observing the scene, understood the dynamics at play. Since Blake's arrival at Hogwarts, Dumbledore had seen him face many challenges, but never had he seen Blake overpowered by another. The situation was clear, and Dumbledore's presence only confirmed the inevitable outcome for the poachers. Dumbledore approached the individual known as Pimpleface, attempting to remove the devil's snare from his mouth, presumably to question him. However, Blake intervened, explaining, "He's lost all his teeth, and his speech is unintelligible. If you need information, it's best to ask someone else." Pimpleface, hoping for a moment of respite, could only glare at Blake in response. Blake, noticing the glare, playfully said to Dumbledore, "Professor, look, he's glaring at me. He looks so fierce. I'm terrified." Dumbledore and Newt shared a moment of silent exasperation before Dumbledore affectionately ruffled Blake's hair, chiding, "You little rascal, can't you speak more respectfully?" Blake retorted, rubbing his head, "What's wrong with how I speak? I'm still a child, after all." Choosing to ignore Pimpleface, Dumbledore moved on to interrogate a poacher they had captured. After a brief interrogation, he obtained crucial information about the location of the Colosseum and the number of guards present. Turning to Newt, Dumbledore confirmed, he wasn't lying. Moreover, this group is distinct from the ones we encountered in Albania. Newt, recalling his perilous adventures in Albania, agreed. Inde, Ed, extracting information from those in Albania was no easy feat. Dumbledore then advised Newt, "Don't join us this time. You're exhausted. Wait until we've dealt with the guards at the Colosseum. Then you can come in and rescue the magical creatures." Blake, noticing Dumbledore's glance towards him, quickly asked, "Am I to wait outside as well?" "Yes, you too," Dumbledore affirmed without hesitation. Blake protested, "But I want to join the fight. It's rare to encounter real battles at Hogwarts, and I was looking forward to this." Dumbledore, with a twinkle in his eye, responded, "As you yourself said, you're still a child. We can't let children join in battles." Blake, momentarily speechless, listened as Dumbledore continued, "I'm only teasing. I'm well aware of your capabilities. Besides, we're in Denmark. It wouldn't be difficult for British oars to assist. However, this time, it's just you and me." Blake's eyes widened in surprise. "Just the two of us?" Dumbledore smiled. "Indeed, just us. After all, who else could stand against us when we join forces?" Blake, with a serious tone, declared, "Together, we're unstoppable. You handle the distractions, and I'll take care of the rest." Turning to Newt, who felt left out, Blake conjured a dimensional door to Newt's living room, suggesting, "Mr. Scamander, enjoy some tea and read the newspaper in your living room. We'll call you when we're done." Newt, feeling somewhat sidelined, lamented, "So, I don't even get to participate? Despite being younger than Albus, I'm treated as the elder." Dumbledore reassured him, "Together, young and old, there are few in this world who can stand against us. Even Voldemort at his peak would think twice." With that, the duo set off, effortlessly defeating their opponents with spells like Expelliarmus, Collapse, and Upside-Down Golden Hook. Their victory was swift, leaving the last of their foes defeated. The Colosseum, hidden within a modified travel tent, was far less grand than its Albanian counterpart. The interior, vastly expanded, featured a central arena for beast combat, surrounded by dilapidated seating. The scarcity of magical creatures within was evident, explaining Pimpleface's earlier excitement at the sight of a large black dragon. Dumbledore, wand in hand, began to inspect the area, ready to uncover the secrets hidden within this makeshift Colosseum. Newt gazed in astonishment at the dimensional door that materialized before him once more, still clutching the teacup in his hand. "So why did you ask me to come back?" he inquired, his tone laced with confusion and a hint of amusement. "I've just brewed a pot of tea, and I haven't even had the chance to sit down and enjoy it. Are you telling me you've already taken care of everything?" Blake, who had been responsible for opening the dimensional door and ensuring Newt's safe teleportation, offered a reassuring smile. "Yes, we've managed to neutralize all the threats. It was quicker than we anticipated." The room was filled with a sense of calm, a stark contrast to the chaos that had unfolded just moments before. The swift resolution of danger had allowed them the luxury of a peaceful tea break, something that seemed almost surreal given the circumstances. Newt, still processing the rapid turn of events, stepped through the dimensional door with a mixture of curiosity and relief. The idea that they had overcome the dangers so swiftly was both impressive and slightly disconcerting. He couldn't help but wonder what had transpired in his brief absence. As he entered the room, the warm aroma of freshly brewed tea greeted him, a comforting reminder of normalcy in the midst of their extraordinary lives. The sight of the cozy chair, previously unoccupied and now inviting him to relax, was a welcome one. "So, you've really dealt with everything that quickly?" Newt asked again, seeking confirmation. His eyes scanned the room, noting the absence of any signs of recent conflict. It was as if the dangers they had faced were nothing but a distant memory, erased by their efficient actions. Blake nodded, a sense of pride evident in his posture. "Indeed, we have. It seems we're becoming quite adept at handling these situations. But now, let's enjoy this well-deserved break. The tea won't drink itself, after all." Newt couldn't help but chuckle at Blake's comment, the tension finally easing from his shoulders. He made his way to the chair, the promise of a warm cup of tea and a moment of peace too enticing to resist. As he settled in, he couldn't shake the feeling of gratitude for the remarkable individuals he had the privilege of calling his allies. Together, they had faced countless challenges, and yet they always found their way back to moments like these, simple, serene, and utterly precious. Chapter 327, Clearing the Sky. "Ha-ha, Mr. Scamander, you're incredibly thoughtful," Blake said, walking over with a familiarity that bordered on cheekiness. He took the teacup from Newt's hands. "Knowing we'd be parched after the battle, you even prepared tea for us." "Well, at least I'm not so useless that I can't even brew a cup of tea for you," Newt replied, a hint of grievance in his voice as he watched his tea being handed over to Dumbledore. That was his tea, after all. The task that followed was straightforward. Newt and Blake were tasked with rescuing the magical creatures from the Colosseum. Blake's role was to tame them, while Newt's was to secure them within his enchanted suitcase. Meanwhile, Dumbledore took charge of the unconscious poachers, transporting them back to England through Blake's dimensional gate. Moody, along with a contingent of Aurors, had been waiting for their return. In the wizarding world, the concept of repatriation was rarely discussed. Criminals were typically imprisoned in the country where they were apprehended, unless the criminal was a high-profile figure like Grindelwald or negotiations between ministries of magic allowed for a transfer. In the case of these dark wizards, with the evidence against them being irrefutable, they were directly sent to Azkaban without the need for interrogation. Thanks to the secrecy of Blake's dimensional gate, there was no need to involve the Danish Ministry of Magic. Once Blake had tamed all the magical creatures, Newt departed with the suitcase in tow. Before leaving, Blake gave Newt several bottles of nourishing potions to alleviate his exhaustion. Newt, in turn, promised to write to his son, asking for his assistance, and assured Dumbledore and Blake not to worry too much. Blake also encountered Moody, who had fully recovered and was more vigorous than ever, much to Tonks's chagrin, who found her boss even more troublesome in his rejuvenated state. Despite Moody's physical recovery, scars from his past still marred his face, a reminder of battles fought. Blake was confident these scars would fade with the development of his new healing potion. "I've been meaning to ask," Dumbledore said with a knowing smile, "with your ability to travel instantly through your portal, why do you choose to linger in Denmark? Do you wish to extend your adventure here?" "Professor, you're well aware that the curriculum at Hogwarts hardly challenges me," Blake replied. "Even so, it's unwise to wander for too long," Dumbledore cautioned. "Professor, have you ever considered the saying that traveling thousands of miles can be more educational than reading thousands of books? How do you know that my journeys are mere escapades and not a form of study?" Blake countered. Dumbledore sighed, a mix of resignation and amusement in his voice. "You're full of surprises, aren't you? Very well, I can't keep you tethered. Go on and travel those thousands of miles. Just try to steer clear of Nurmengard." After bidding Dumbledore farewell, Blake reopened the dimensional door, retrieving Luna and Nagini from a room where they had been resting. "Is everything resolved?" Luna asked, her curiosity piqued by the absence of the poachers. "It's settled. I've handed them over to the Aurors. By now, they're likely on their way to Azkaban," Blake explained. "Oh." Luna nodded, then hesitated before asking, "Where were we resting just now? I didn't dare venture out." Blake had transported them directly to the Shrieking Shack, a place where Dumbledore had once imparted knowledge of dark magic to him, explaining how to wield these forbidden powers with love. "You were actually back at Hogwarts," Blake revealed with a smile. Luna and Nagini exchanged puzzled looks. "That's odd. We traveled for 2 days to get here, only to end up back where we started for a rest?" With no more adversaries to contend with, Blake decided to set up camp once again, allowing them a moment of peace in the midst of their adventures. After enjoying a delightful dinner, the trio decided to rest for the night, embracing the tranquility that surrounded them. As dawn broke, they rose early, ready to embark on the day's adventures. This time, however, Blake informed Lou and Nagini that there was no need to prepare breakfast in the traditional sense, as they could manage something on the go. Luna, intrigued by the idea, couldn't help but wonder if they would be preparing their morning meal atop a fire-breathing dragon or some other magical creature. The thought seemed rather impractical to her. "It's not difficult at all," Blake assured her, his eyes twinkling with excitement. "In fact, I find it quite fascinating." Luna's expression was a mix of confusion and curiosity. Nagini, ever practical, asked, "So, how do you plan for us to set off today? Are we taking a car?" She was aware that Blake was capable of driving a Muggle vehicle. "Of course not," Blake replied, his tone light and teasing. Without further ado, he reached into his backpack and pulled out a long, rolled-up item. "What's that?" Luna inquired, her curiosity piqued. "You were born in England, so it's understandable that you've never seen one of these before. They're illegal in the UK, Blake explained, his voice laced with a hint of mischief. "Oh, you mean like how raising dragons is also illegal?" "Ahem, that's okay," Luna responded, trying to make light of the situation. With a flourish, Blake tossed the roll into the air. It unfurled with a whoosh, revealing itself to be a large, dark red carpet. But this was no ordinary carpet. It hovered mysteriously mid-air. "This is a flying carpet," Luna exclaimed, her eyes wide with wonder. "Exactly, Luna, this is indeed a flying carpet," Blake confirmed with a smile. Carpets, as you know, are originally Muggle inventions. According to the Muggle Protection Act in the UK, it's illegal to enchant Muggle items with magic. Therefore, transforming a carpet into a flying one is strictly prohibited there. He spread his hands wide, adding, "But we're not in England anymore, are we?" Luna and Nagini gazed at the floating carpet, their minds racing with possibilities. "You mean we can actually make breakfast up here?" Luna asked, her voice filled with excitement. "That's right. We're currently in Denmark, not far from Sweden, which means we're close to our destination. We can comfortably continue our journey on this flying carpet. We could even rest here at night, without the need for setting up camp. A simple spell can protect us from the wind and rain," Blake explained, his enthusiasm infectious. With a sense of novelty, Luna and Nagini climbed onto the flying carpet, which was suspended half a meter above the ground. "Can you control this thing?" Luna asked, her curiosity getting the better of her. "Of course," Blake replied as he joined them on the carpet. He fumbled for a small circular mechanism at one end. "Let's see. I need to adjust the height first, then set the direction." Before he could finish, the carpet began to ascend slowly. "Aha! It's working! Just like a hot air balloon," Blake exclaimed with a grin. He then proceeded to cast a series of spells. First, he used a protective charm to ensure that neither Muggles nor other wizards could see the flying carpet and its passengers. Next, he applied a wind-blocking spell, similar to the one he had used on the large black dragon, to shield them from the strong air currents. Lastly, Blake placed enchanted sunflowers on the carpet, which immediately made the entire area warm and comfortable. Luna lay down on the carpet, gazing at the ground as it receded further and further away. A sense of wonder filled her heart. "If we camp in the sky tonight, will I be able to see the stars just by lying down?" she asked, her voice filled with hope. "Yes," Blake assured her. "And what if it's cloudy and we can't see the stars?" Luna pressed on. "Then I'll make the sky clear," Blake promised, his voice confident and reassuring. Chapter 328. Never Show Mercy to Your Enemies. The flying carpet glided slowly eastward, carrying the three Blakes through the night sky. They lay on the carpet, gazing up at the stars, unobstructed by clouds. This was thanks to Blake's powerful weather spell, which ensured not a single dark cloud could linger in their vicinity. Eventually, finding it cumbersome to constantly clear the sky, Blake decided to let the flying carpet soar above the cloud layer, granting them an unimpeded view of the heavens. "By the way, we should arrive in Sweden by tomorrow, right?" Luna broke the silence with a question that had been on her mind. "And once we're there, how do we go about finding the Snorlax?" she added, her voice tinged with uncertainty. "We'll start our search in places where a Snorlax is most likely to be found," Blake replied, his tone confident. Luna fell silent for a moment before voicing another concern. "What if? And I'm just saying what if we can't find it?" Blake was taken aback by her doubt. Luna had always been the most ardent believer in the existence of the bent-horned Snorlax. Her sudden skepticism made him wonder if her previous assertions of belief were just to appease her father. However, Blake's response was unwavering. "How can we not find it? If this creature exists in the world, I will find it. The bent-horned Snorlax does exist, and we will find it." Luna's worry stemmed from a fear of disappointment, a sentiment Blake understood but chose not to dwell on. "We will find it," he reassured her firmly. Despite the flying carpet's seemingly leisurely pace, their direct route through the sky meant they arrived in Sweden in no time. After spending a night resting on the carpet, they set off at dawn, ready to begin their search. Blake led them with a clear plan in mind, focusing on swamps, dense forests, and caves, environments he had determined to be ideal for the Snorlax, based on its described preferences for cold, damp habitats that shunned light and heat. This knowledge was based on the creature's characteristics as described by Xenophilius, which Blake had adhered to when creating this new species. Upon their arrival, Blake had used a dimensional gate to release a group of bent-horned Snorlaxes into Sweden. These creatures, capable of becoming invisible, had scattered to find suitable habitats, making their current locations unknown even to Blake. "We need to use this to mask our scent," Blake instructed, handing out 2 bottles of spray to Nagini and Luna. Under his guidance, they applied the spray, which would conceal their presence from magical creatures and also offer protection against mosquitoes. With their preparations complete, Blake unfolded a map and began plotting their course. including a few detours to observe other magical creatures, like the Swedish short snout. Once the route was set, Blake produced 3 broomsticks from his seemingly bottomless pocket and handed one to Nagini and another to Luna. "Have you taken flying lessons? Can you ride a broomstick?" he asked Luna. "Of course," Luna replied confidently, accepting the broom from Blake. "All right then, follow me," Blake said, mounting his modified broom. Luna followed suit, and seeing her manage just fine, Blake nodded in approval. "Well, our next destination is—" As Blake enthusiastically pointed out their destination, a commotion erupted not far from them. "Grab it! It's over there!" voices shouted. "I've never seen such a creature. Catching it could fetch a good price." A group of people seemed to be in the midst of a hunt, their voices filled with excitement and greed. A sense of foreboding washed over Blake, and suddenly a gray shadow appeared before him. The creature, about the size of a goat but resembling a rhinoceros, stood before them. Its gray-brown skin stretched over its body, and atop its head sat a surprisingly large nose and a curved horn from which a faint white light emanated. Blake stared in shock. "Horned Snorlax!" Luna exclaimed, her voice laced with surprise. At that moment, Blake couldn't to help but feel a mix of emotions. He had planned a leisurely exploration of Sweden, intending to tame magical creatures and enjoy the company of the locals. Yet, the very creature he sought had appeared before him, seemingly out of nowhere. He had chosen his landing spot, far from where these creatures were known to roam, hoping to track them down later. The unexpected encounter left him puzzled and slightly amused. "Well," Blake began, but the horned Snorlax, upon seeing him, didn't flee. Instead, it approached him excitedly, making sounds reminiscent of a cow. It was clear the creature wouldn't run. Blake had tamed it long ago. Now, faced with danger, it was overjoyed to find its master. Blake sighed and dismounted his broom. The Snorlax rushed to him, rubbing its head against his robe. Carefully, Blake pushed its horn aside to avoid being poked. Luna watched in astonishment. The Snorlax was known to be a shy creature, yet here it was, not only unafraid, but actively seeking contact. Blake gently touched the Snorlax's head, finding it trembling. "It's okay. Don't be afraid," he soothed, turning his attention to the direction from which the Snorlax had come. The sounds of pursuit were getting closer. Suddenly, the dense underbrush was forcefully parted, and more than 10 people burst out of the woods, wands in hand. These were wizards, and their appearance made the Snorlax hide behind Blake. Nagini and Luna had also dismounted their brooms by this time. Although Luna was curious about the Snorlax, the situation was not conducive to a peaceful interaction. These men seemed more formidable than the poachers they had encountered the night before. Blake was not surprised. The valuable materials from magical creatures had always made poaching a lucrative profession, exacerbated by the lax enforcement of magical laws. This was why Newt Scamander had traveled the world with a suitcase full of magical creatures he had rescued from poachers. Though the situation had improved since then, poaching was still a significant problem. "Boy, hand over that animal. We won't hurt you," one of the poachers demanded. Another, with a menacing look, glanced over the trio, his gaze lingering on Nagini and Luna with evident desire. He sneered, "What nonsense! Are you running a charity? Kill the men and keep the women." At his words, the other poachers raised their wands, ready to attack. Luna looked on in horror as the confrontation escalated. Blake, prepared for this moment, conjured a red circular magical shield adorned with intricate runes. It enveloped them like a protective dome. The next second, a barrage of spells struck the shield, but their ferocious power couldn't penetrate the magical barrier Blake had summoned. With a cold expression, Blake drew his wand. Boom! A fiery red light erupted from the tip, sweeping across the area like a laser. Every poacher touched by the red light was hurled backward several meters, landing with a terrifying scar on their chest, as if burned by flames. In an instant, the previously noisy forest fell silent, save for the poacher leader who had just spoken. The rest lay motionless, their fates uncertain. You! The leader stammered, his legs trembling with fear. Blake had effortlessly incapacitated his entire team, leaving him alone and terrified. Blake emerged from the protective seraphim shield, advancing towards the frightened poacher. "You! Don't come any closer," the poacher warned, raising his wand in a panic and casting Avada Kedavra. A green light shot towards Blake, who, unfazed, deflected the curse with a flick of his wand. The poacher's attempts to intimidate Blake with the killing curse proved futile. Closing the distance, Blake interrupted the leader's next attempt at the curse with a swift strike, sending him to the ground. Stepping forward, Blake crushed the poacher's wand beneath his foot and grabbed him by the collar, sparks flying from his grasp. He then transported the leader to a secluded location, explaining, "I spared you not out of mercy, but because your actions angered me. I particularly dislike the look in your eyes. What I'm about to do is too cruel for others to witness." The poacher pleaded for mercy, offering his wealth in exchange for his life, but Blake's response was a fierce golden light from his eyes, striking the poacher at close range. Moments later, the leader vanished, leaving behind a smoldering pit. Luna, witnessing Blake's actions, turned to Nagini with a trembling voice. "Sister Nagini, are they all?" Nagini confirmed, "Yes, they're mostly dead." She then explained the harsh reality of their situation and the importance of not showing mercy to enemies, for it could lead to their own demise. Luna, understanding the gravity of Nagini's words, vowed to remember this lesson. As Nagini stepped out of the Seraphim shield, she dealt with the remaining poachers who had managed to rise, casting the killing curse on them. Luna watched with mixed emotions as Nagini's expression remained impassive under the green glow of the spell. Blake reappeared, his presence signaling the end of the confrontation. The lesson of strength and the necessity of harsh actions in the face of danger had been imparted, leaving a lasting impact on Luna. Blake surveyed the scene before him, the aftermath of their encounter still visible in the chaos that surrounded them. The object of their quest, the scimitar-horned Snorlax, had been secured, but at a cost that weighed heavily on him. He caught a glimpse of the wand in Nagini's grasp and the somber expression on Luna's face, understanding immediately the turn of events. With a soft sigh, Blake acknowledged the situation. "Now that we've found the scimitar-horned Snorlax, it's time to head back. I've only witnessed something like this once before." It was clear that the adventure had lost its allure for both Luna and Blake, the thrill of the hunt overshadowed by the grim reality of their actions. "Okay," Luna responded, her voice carrying a tone of subdued compliance. With a flick of his wand, Blake conjured a circular dimensional door, its swirling energies offering a passage back to safety. "You two go ahead. I'll take care of cleaning up here before I return," he instructed, his tone firm yet tinged with an unspoken sadness. Nagini, with Luna and the bent-horned Snorlax in tow, stepped through the dimensional gate, which whisked them away to the entrance of Hogsmeade. Luna paused for a moment, turning to cast a final glance back at Blake. He stood alone, wand in hand, amidst the devastation. His figure, a solitary sentinel against the backdrop of fallen foes, remained etched in her vision until the dimensional gate slowly faded from existence, leaving Blake to his solemn task. The silence that followed was a stark contrast to the chaos that had reigned moments before. Blake's actions, though necessary, carried the weight of consequence, a reminder of the fine line between heroism and the harsh realities of their world. As the gate disappeared, so too did the last witness to the aftermath, leaving Blake to face the consequences of their actions in solitude. Chapter 329, The Threat of Exposure. "Blake, did you harm me?" Blake had only recently returned to Hogwarts when Lockhart, having heard the news, approached him. They found a secluded spot where Lockhart posed his question with a hint of trepidation in his voice. Blake looked puzzled. "Harm you? How could I possibly harm you?" "The article in the Daily Prophet, Lockhart stammered, struggling to articulate his thoughts. With an expression of innocence, Blake replied, "The article was penned by Rita Skeeter. Your manuscript was rejected by the Daily Prophet. What does that have to do with me? But how did she, that woman, uncover my secret?" Lockhart asked, his voice laced with panic. Blake took a step back, maintaining his calm demeanor. "She discovered your secret, so what the newspaper published wasn't a rumor but the truth. Interesting." Lockhart quickly waved his hands in denial. No, I mean, that photograph. The photograph of the victim published in the Daily Prophet, the one named Ackerman Allen Guy. "Oh, who is he?" Blake feigned ignorance. You don't know who he is." Lockhart looked at Blake, shocked by his apparent lack of knowledge. Since you claim I don't know him, why do you assume I know your secrets? Blake narrowed his eyes, a sly smile forming on his lips. So he's another one of your victims. Lockhart, your misdeeds are truly boundless. Actually, I was only aware of a couple of your wrongdoings. Until now, that is, Blake added, giving Lockhart a meaningful look. Who knows how many lives you've ruined? Blake strategically chose not to admit any familiarity with Ackerman. Acknowledging such a connection would imply to Lockhart that he was the source of the leak, especially since the article had been circulating for several days. Lockhart froze, finally understanding Blake's implication. He had mistakenly thought Blake was fully aware of his crimes, but in reality, Blake only had a vague idea of his misdeeds. So, you thought you knew all about my actions because you believed I had only committed a couple of crimes. I didn't realize you thought so lowly of me, Blake said, feigning innocence. Lockhart eyed Blake suspiciously. So it wasn't you who informed Rita? Of course not. What benefit would I gain from exposing you? Blake responded, then smiled smugly. Besides, by holding this secret over you, I stand to gain much more in the future. Why would I eliminate my golden goose now? Upon hearing this, Lockhart believed Blake was not the one who had betrayed him. The thought of being blackmailed by Blake in the future filled him with a mix of sadness and anger. Blake, you don't push me too far, Lockhart warned. Am I going too far? Blake sneered. I wonder, is it excessive to confront someone who steals others' stories, claims them as his own, and then erases the true author's memory with a memory charm? Lockhart was left speechless, his eyes reddening and his facial muscles twitching in anger. After a moment, Lockhart spoke in a trembling voice. I'm sorry, it's my fault. Blake, please, don't tell anyone. I'm willing to pay you a sum of gold galleons every month from now on. Really? Blake's interest was piqued. I suppose you're thinking that once I turn my back, you'll cast your best memory charm on me, right? Lockhart's eyes betrayed his panic. No. That's not what I was thinking. Blake, you're misunderstanding me. As Blake stepped closer, Lockhart involuntarily retreated. Oh, so you're not planning to ambush me later and erase my memory with a memory charm? No, I would never do that. You have to believe me, Lockhart pleaded. Professor Dumbledore has always had his suspicions about you, Lockhart, and I'm sure you're aware of that, Blake continued, his tone serious. Lockhart nodded quickly, acknowledging the truth in Blake's words. Blake concluded, So do you really think you can escape Dumbledore's scrutiny by using a memory charm on me? You're aware of my relationship with him. If you harm me, what do you think he'll do to you? Don't be so naive as to think that those who appear great and upright won't resort to underhanded methods. That's only because you haven't threatened their core interests yet. So, the next time you consider covertly aiming your wand at me, I urge you to ponder this carefully. As these words were spoken, Lockhart's hand trembled, and a wand slipped from his sleeve. In the Lovegood's yard, Luna was presenting a large handful of fresh leaves to a creature known as the bent-horned Snorlax, which lay on the ground, contentedly munching on its meal. After spending a day together, Luna had grown quite accustomed to the creature, especially when she approached with fresh leaves in hand. In the midst of winter, finding fresh and tender leaves was a challenge. Yet, Blake had managed to procure several baskets of them by opening a dimensional door and gathering them from other locations. Not far away, Mr. Lovegood was busy adjusting his equipment, eager to capture a photograph of the bent-horned Snorlax. The magical creature he had been searching for years was finally before him, alive and well. The excitement was palpable as he envisioned publishing a new issue of the Quibbler featuring this discovery. Suddenly, a dimensional door flickered into existence, and Blake emerged, followed by Mr. Newt Scamander, who appeared significantly more vigorous, thanks in part to Blake's nourishing potion and the assistance of his son. Furthermore, the announcement of a new zoo had attracted numerous magizoologists to Newt's Island, easing his workload considerably. That one over there is the bent-horned Snorlax, Blake pointed out to Newt, whose eyes widened in astonishment. This, the bent-horned creature, truly exists. He had come across discussions of the Snorlax in the Quibbler, and, despite the skepticism, had ventured to Sweden in search of it, to no avail. Thus, witnessing the creature firsthand was a moment of profound revelation for him. After a thorough examination from a professional standpoint, Newt concluded that this was indeed a previously undiscovered species. "Let's wait for Mr. Lovegood to take the photograph," Blake suggested. "Afterwards, you can temporarily house this creature in your zoo." Luna, who was listening, felt a twinge of reluctance at the thought of parting with the Snorlax, but realized her schooling and her father's work commitments left her little choice but to agree. Newt, observing the creature's docile behavior, couldn't help but smile. "It seems my fantastic beasts and where to find them is due for an update." The flash of Mr. Lovegood's old camera momentarily lit up the scene, but the bent-horned Snorlax merely blinked lazily and continued its meal, much to Mr. Lovegood's relief, who had feared the flash might startle it. Unbeknownst to him, Blake had already ensured the creature's cooperation. Mr. Lovegood proceeded to take numerous photos, including one of Newt with the Snorlax. With Newt's endorsement, the authenticity of the Snorlax's existence would be beyond dispute. That night, the Lovegood's old printing press worked tirelessly, and by the next morning, thousands of copies of the Quibbler's latest edition were ready for distribution. Mr. Lovegood had never before printed so many copies of his publication, marking a significant moment in the history of the Quibbler. Filled with apprehension, he voiced his concern. "Even with Mr. Scamander's endorsement, can our magazine truly achieve sales of 10,000 copies? Blake responded with astonishment. "Selling 10,000 copies? That's utterly unrealistic." Mr. Lovegood was taken aback. "I've printed so many copies. If they don't sell, won't I incur a loss?" Blake offered a reassuring smile. "Who mentioned anything about selling them?" Confused, Mr. Lovegood asked. "If we're not selling, what are we supposed to do with all these magazines?" Blake clarified. "If selling isn't the plan, then naturally we'll distribute them for free. Give them away. But how could we?" Mr. Lovegood was flabbergasted. The idea of distributing the magazines without charge was beyond his expectations. Blake explained, "These initial investments are crucial. Trust me on this." Mr. Lovegood hesitated. The cost printing thousands of copies weighed heavily on his mind. "Dad, I have faith in Blake. Please, have faith in him as well," Luna implored earnestly. Confronted with his daughter's serious plea and the mountain of magazines, Mr. Lovegood capitulated. "Oh, all right. I'll heed your advice." Upon witnessing her father's agreement, Luna's face lit up with a radiant smile directed at Blake. For reasons unknown, Mr. Lovegood felt a pang of discomfort witnessing this exchange. Chapter 330. No, Dad really needs the money. Although Mr. Lovegood had verbally agreed to Blake's request, a dull pain tugged at his heart. The cost of printing thousands of copies of the Quibbler was nearly 1 gold galleon each. Now, Blake was proposing to give them away for free. However, Blake seemed to anticipate Mr. Lovegood's concerns and promptly placed something heavy into his hand. Feeling the weight, Mr. Lovegood's heartache vanished. "You mentioned wanting me to be the deputy editor, which makes me a member of the Quibbler team," Blake explained. "How could I not invest in our venture? Consider this 1,000 gold galleons as my initial investment." Mr. Lovegood's heart twinged again, but this time with guilt. He knew the true state of the Quibbler's finances. It was nowhere near worth 1,000 gold galleons. The thought that a casual conversation had led to such a generous offer from Blake weighed heavily on his conscience. Despite his inner turmoil, Mr. Lovegood pocketed the gold galleons. He couldn't help but wonder if Blake was naive. But Blake was far from foolish. In fact, he was understanding the value of his investment, especially with Luna watching. This gesture wasn't just about the money. It was about securing a valuable partnership and possibly gaining access to the treasure chest Mr. Lovegood had mentioned, which was hidden under a layer of grass. "Dad, how could you accept that?" Luna exclaimed, her voice tinged with disappointment. Mr. Lovegood was at a loss for words. Luna's reaction made it clear she didn't want her father to exploit Blake's generosity, nor did she want to see Blake taken advantage of. Observing his daughter's concern, Mr. Lovegood's spirits dampened. He watched, heartbroken, as Luna retrieved the bag of gold galleons and attempted to return it to Blake, insisting her father didn't need the money. Blake, however, found the situation amusing. "No, Luna, I have many plans for the Quibbler that will require funding. "It wouldn't be fair to expect your father to cover these costs," he said, pushing the galleons back into Mr. Lovegood's pocket. Mr. Lovegood was deeply moved by Blake's gesture, recognizing the genuine kindness behind it. Luna, unable to argue further, reluctantly accepted Blake's decision, but warned her father not to squander the money. Feeling a mix of gratitude and responsibility, Mr. Lovegood vowed silently not to misuse the funds. He realized that his usually thoughtful daughter was showing a rare streak of impracticality, much to his chagrin. Blake, seizing the moment, outlined his vision for the Quibbler. "First, we'll need to upgrade the printing press and hire additional staff. Diversifying the magazine's content will attract a broader readership. Relying solely on your articles would limit our appeal." Mr. Lovegood nodded in agreement, acutely aware of these needs, but previously constrained by financial limitations. Now, with Blake's investment, these goals seemed attainable. "Given your increased investment and stake in the magazine, I'll follow your lead," Mr. Lovegood declared, accepting Blake's role as the new driving force behind the Quibbler. "You're now the boss, and I'm at your service." Embracing his new role, Blake was determined to revitalize the Quibbler, not just for the sake of the publication, but to honor the trust and partnership forming between him, Mr. Lovegood, and Luna. Blake understood the importance of listening to others' advice and ensuring everyone had enough resources. "Okay, then I'll follow your lead," he said, not hesitating to take charge. "I'll take these magazines first," he announced. Mr. Lovegood, ever the gracious host, gestured generously. Take them. I'll acquire a new printing press soon and start recruiting additional staff." Blake then produced a suitcase, opening it with a flourish. With a casual wave of his wand, the magazines floated gracefully into the suitcase. "Once you've set up the new machine and hired your team, I'll provide the content for the next issue of the Quibbler. Although these copies have their quirks, their content lacks depth. However, they're novel enough to make an excellent special edition." "Where do you plan to distribute these copies of the Quibbler?" Mr. Lovegood inquired, a hint of melancholy in his voice from previous attempts to give away the magazine. Blake smiled with confidence. "Somewhere with a large crowd," he replied. In the wizarding world, places teeming with idle people were rare, but Diagon Alley was an exception, particularly a newly opened magic beauty salon. The salon was bustling, a testament to the irresistible allure of beauty enhancements. The magic beauty treatments offered were far superior to those found in the Muggle world, providing immediate and noticeable effects. Agnes and Agatha, the salon's proprietors, were overwhelmed with customers. Agatha, however, had only worked for 2 days before taking her leave for maternity reasons. Her presence in the salon, wand drawn as if ready for a duel, had been a source of discomfort for both her and the clients. After earning some profit, Agnes hired additional staff to manage the increasing demand. Agatha, meanwhile, had ventured to Nocturne Alley to deal with her dark wizard brothers. Despite the new hires, the salon's secret beauty spells remained exclusive to Agnes, leading to long queues of witches waiting for her services. To alleviate the tedium of waiting, Blake introduced the Quibbler to the salon's clientele. Without smartphones to pass the time, the magazine offered a welcome distraction. Its unique content, though somewhat limited, provided entertainment for those in line. Blake's strategy proved successful. A third of the 1,000 copies he brought were distributed in just half a day. The lasting effects of the beauty treatments meant that customers wouldn't return immediately, allowing the magazine to remain relevant for several days. That evening, Blake returned to Mr. Lovegood's home, requesting another 1,000 copies to be printed overnight. The next morning, he replenished the salon's supply, ensuring a steady flow of reading material for the waiting customers. By evening, Mr. Lovegood had good news. 3 new recruits had joined his team. Blake, upon meeting them, initially mistook them for Ravenclaw students due to their glasses, a common stereotype for academically inclined wizards. Upon inquiry, he discovered they were indeed Ravenclaw graduates, adding a new layer of expertise to the Quibbler's production team. Blake had always been known for his exceptional grades during his school years. However, his introverted personality, bordering on social phobia, made the prospect of traditional employment daunting. So, when he came across Lovegood's advertisement for writers, he was immediately interested. The idea of crafting manuscripts in solitude was far more appealing than navigating the complexities of office dynamics. Blake was unfazed by the unique challenges this job presented. He quickly began to delegate tasks, starting with Mr. Lovegood, whom he appointed as the editor-in-chief and head of the Fantastic Beasts column. Turning his attention to the other 3 recruits, Blake introduced a rather unconventional assignment. He produced a stack of books from his pocket, which, upon closer inspection, were revealed to be popular novels from the Muggle world. "These are best-sellers among Muggles," Blake explained. "Your task is to transform these stories, replace the characters, settings, and worldviews with those of the wizarding world. Then, I'll draw inspiration from your adaptations to serialize in our magazine." A timid, overweight man among the recruits hesitantly raised his hand, voicing his concern about the ethical implications of their assignment. "Isn't this plagiarism? It seems a bit wrong," he stammered. Blake's response was a sly smile. "Technically, plagiarism is forbidden, but these are Muggle books. Do you really think Muggles, unaware of our existence, will sue us?" The recruit's apprehension faded, replaced by a sense of relief and excitement. Adapting these stories suddenly seemed like an easy and lucrative task. Blake continued, outlining the specifics of their overnight assignment. Each writer was to adapt 3 books, each from a different genre, and pay special attention to creating suspenseful chapter endings to entice readers to purchase subsequent issues. The room filled with gasps of astonishment. Mr. Lovegood, flushed with excitement, expressed his regret for not having met Blake sooner. The once timid man now shared a gleeful anticipation for the task, especially the prospect of crafting cliffhangers. Blake, slightly disturbed by the man's enthusiasm, reiterated the plan to release the first issue for free, with subsequent issues being sold. Mr. Lovegood, thoroughly impressed, still harbored concerns about the potential reception of these adapted stories. "Don't worry," Blake reassured him. "The wizarding world has a limited number of writers, and even fewer who write novels. Muggles, on the other hand, have a wealth of stories that have already proven popular. Our readers, who have been content with subpar adventure novels, will be captivated by the depth and variety of Muggle storytelling." Blake revealed that the initial focus would be on romance novels, targeting the predominantly female clientele of the Magic Beauty Salon. He then inquired about the previous distribution of the Quibbler, learning it was sold at Flourish and Blotts, where they had the freedom to set their own prices for privately printed books. This strategic approach, leveraging the untapped potential of Muggle literature and catering to an underserved audience, promised to revolutionize the Quibbler's content and appeal. Blake's innovative vision was set to captivate the wizarding world, offering a fresh and exciting reading experience. Blake had made an agreement with Flourish and Blott's bookstore to sell the 3rd issue of The Quibbler. They would take a 30% commission on sales, but it was up to Blake to manage any unsold copies. With a smile, Blake confirmed the arrangement and added that he would also set up a small stand at the Magic Beauty Salon to sell the magazine, though he planned to stock it sparingly. Another day passed, and the latest issue of The Quibbler was officially released. This time, Blake ambitiously printed 5,000 copies, deciding to distribute them for free. The new printing press Mr. Lovegood had acquired was pushed to its limits, much to his chagrin, as it billowed smoke from the effort. Blake wasted no time in distributing the 2nd issue of The Quibbler as a complimentary addition at the Magic Beauty Salon. Delise, a regular customer at the salon, was drawn in by the magical treatments that rejuvenated her skin. Upon her arrival, she noticed the usual long line of customers and picked up a copy of The Quibbler to pass the time. She was pleasantly surprised to find it was a new, thicker issue than the one she had previously read, which filled her with a sense of excitement. As Delise flipped through the pages of The Quibbler, she stumbled upon a serialized novel titled Twilight. Intrigued, she began reading and soon found herself completely engrossed in the story. Meanwhile, Agnes, who provided beauty treatments at the salon, noticed a peculiar change in the flow of customers. The usual quick turnover had slowed, leaving her with unexpected breaks. Curious, she stepped out of the treatment room to investigate and was astonished to find the customers deeply absorbed in their copies of the Quibbler. Their expressions varied wildly, from anger to amusement, as if the magazine had cast a spell over them. This unexpected turn of events left Agnes wondering if there was something magical about the magazines Blake had distributed, captivating the salon's clientele with its content.